John, you're a total rock star. Love you so much and love the talk radio audience all throughout Minnesota. You do such a great job. I'm a big fan.
I feel like my timing was just a skosh off this morning, right? The AI overlords, the house band, unfortunately, like the way that I have multiple versions to play, and the times are all wonky, so I'm doing my prep and then I end up doing math to try to time it out right to the top of the hour here on the show. So as people start to arrive to the John Justice Show, presented by American Experiment, I will say good morning, and I'm glad you're with us. I had another harrowing drive in today. And by the way, don't start to worry that I'm going to be opening every single show with my driving adventures, right? It just happened to be 2 days in a row where some interesting things have happened. Yesterday, as I mentioned, there was a law enforcement officer on 62, and friend of the show, Pat, had pointed this out. She was absolutely right. I didn't realize that it was right by if you're heading west on 62, right by the Tracy exit. And she posted yesterday on X that's where the State Patrol and the law enforcement like to go and hang out. So I made sure to traverse that area gingerly on the drive-in this morning. Good morning to producer Devin, by the way. I want to make sure I do
good morning
proper introductions out of the gate. I completely forgot about that yesterday. My apologies. No, this happened earlier on the drive. I'm coming down 100. I just made the transition on the 100 right around Brooklyn Park, Brooklyn Center area, and it's still 2 lanes right there. Okay. And, the person in the right lane, the slow lane, was fine. They were doing like just a skosh over 60. But the person in the left-hand lane was matching the speed in the fast lane, right? And I'm like, and I was running a little bit later than I typically do. So this was probably around 4:45-ish, right? And there's a significant difference between being on the road, like between 4 and 4:30, and then when you get into between 4:30 and 5, there's a lot more cars on the road. And the traffic started to stack up behind these 2 cars, and I was the lead car right behind the one in front in the fast lane. And neither of them were doing what normal, rational people would do, and that is either speed up or slow down to clear the fast lane out so people can go by. So, again, all these, I don't know, there had to be a dozen or more cars. They're all just stacking up. And so, and I did something that I never do. I was not tailgating the little, Toyota Versa or whatever it was in front of me. I wasn't tailgating it, but I actually did flash them the high beams. I was like, dude, come on. Because I just get everybody's getting mad at the guy behind me is getting mad at me. The guy behind him is getting mad at him. And it's just everybody's getting frustrated. And this totally came to fruition because the moment that there was a third lane opened up, and it's not technically a third lane, it's an off ramp. Because there's one off ramp where a third lane, it opens to get off of 100. But then that closes again. It goes back down to 2 until you get about half a mile down the road, and it opens up to 3. So the moment that third lane, the exit lane popped up, a bunch of cars started going right to go past them, the 2 cars in the fast and the slow lane. And I'm watching this going, oh, this is going to end in disaster, right? So like one car made it by, the rest of them didn't time it. So they all got stuck behind the other guy in the slow lane. So then we're back down to 2 lanes again. And finally, when it opened up to 3, it was a freaking free-for-all. Like all the cars just scattered. The guy who was in the slow lane, he moved over to the right, seeing what was going on. The guy behind him tried to go and fill the gap. I tried to swing around to get behind the guy in the fast lane, almost converging with the guy in the far right lane who was coming over. It was It was a melee, man. It was an absolute melee. It made for a fun little moment, though. I'll tell you that much. So the lesson here is if you're in the fast lane, get out of it and go to the other lane. I don't understand how people do that, how people get stuck when they drive side by side and they match someone's speed. It's just either slow down or speed up. You don't need to be driving right next to another vehicle unless you're in stacked traffic, right? Otherwise, it's just like you've got just slow down, just separate, for crying out loud. So after that, it was pretty uneventful. All right, on the show this morning, we got a lot of guests joining us today. Erica Littman, he's with the Public Utilities Commission, and he has a really interesting issue that you are going to want to hear about. He'll be joining us at 8:30 this morning. I know you may be going, and public utilities issue? Why? No, he actually is attempting to be preemptive. A Ratepayer Association wants to keep state commissioners out of the Caribbean. You have commissioners for the Minnesota Public Utilities Commission that are spending ridiculous amounts of money on travel to other countries. Why? Your guess is as good as mine. We'll talk with Eric about this, but he's trying to get out ahead of it because there's no reason for these Minnesota Public Utility Commission individuals to be spending your taxpayer dollars to go traveling to the Caribbean. You know, Disneyland, Pirates of the Caribbean, or otherwise. It's my favorite ride. So he'll be joining us at 8:30. Right before that, Liz Collin from Alpha News. She will be hopping on the show with us. Looking forward to Liz's first appearance on the new iteration of the John Justice Show presented by American Experiment. We'll be specifically talking about Derek Chauvin seeking dismissal of the charges in a bombshell filing alleging unlawful and fraudulent conduct. So Liz Collin will be joining us at 8:15. And at 7:30 this morning, Lisa Damuth, gubernatorial lieutenant governor candidate, Ryan Wilson, will be sitting on the sofa again, 7:30 here at the Center of the American Experiment Studios to talk about a press conference that Lisa gave yesterday calling out Amy Klobuchar and her desire publicly, since becoming the gubernatorial candidate, to tackle fraud, but the fact that up until she started to run for governor, she didn't give a rip. My words, not theirs, by the way. So we'll talk about that and other fraud-related issues and other issues regarding Lisa Damuth's campaign. If you have any questions, by the way, for Ryan Wilson, you can get those in early, john.justice@americanexperiment.org, or you can leave us a blast at 612-584-4565. Again, 612-584-4565. We already have a lot of comments that have rolled in this morning before the show and actually after the show ended yesterday. So we'll get to a few of these as we kick off Wednesday's midweek show here on the John Justice Show presented by American Experiment.
Hi, this is Lori from Edina calling. Long-time listener, never called in before. I just love this prologue to your show with the music, listening to Communist Kool-Aid and enjoying myself. Anyway, love the new show. Usually listen to the podcast, but I'm able to listen live today. Looking forward to a great show.
You can hear Communism Kool-Aid jamming in the background. So I mentioned that I've been making my own personal music based off of poetry that I wrote back in the 90s. Okay. I'm telling you, they are some jams. I was listening to some of them on the way in this morning. I was thinking maybe I'll do a montage on a Freedom Friday. So instead of parodies to go and kick off the show, you can hear some sweet John Justice synth pop, or at least created by the AI overlords. Or maybe I won't torture you. Who knows? I have between now and Friday morning to decide. So we'll get back to more of your comments coming up here in just a moment on the show. Again, 612-584-4565. Let's start here, though. Melissa Ferris. She was accused of vandalizing the World War II memorial and was released under conditions, including travel restrictions and a requirement to stay away from the memorial. I saw a picture of this woman, and she looks exactly like you would expect a white liberal woman who decided to go and vandalize the World War II memorial would look. Yeah. Tattooed, old, disheveled, angry, unattractive, all of it. It couldn't be any more stereotypical. She couldn't have been any more stereotypical of a white liberal woman these days if she tried. So let's get into some of the details of this. And I have a question that I need some help on. So Melissa Ferris, again, released on Monday after this hearing in the U.S. District Court of Columbia. The court ordered Ferris to submit to supervision through the Pretrial Services Agency. Under the conditions of release, the court must approve any travel outside of the continental United States. The order requires Ferris to stay out of Washington, D.C., except for court or pretrial services. She must stay away from the Veterans Memorial and report to the Pretrial Services Agency for a mental health screening and possible connection to mental health services if necessary. Yeah, listen, the woman needs help, as do almost everybody who's suffering from Trump derangement syndrome. Again, I'll get to my question here in just a second because I have an idea. I have an idea how to deal with all this stuff, right? Because there's a lot of Trump derangement syndrome vandalism going on as of late. Okay? So Ferris must also verify her address with the pretrial services and sign a release of information. Do they have like addresses for spots on the sidewalk? I just out of curiosity. Because she looked homeless. She's probably not, but she looked homeless. The court's standard conditions prohibit Ferris from violating federal law, state or local law while on release and require her to appear for future court proceedings. The court records show that Ferris was released on a personal bond, meaning the bond was not secured by cash or property. Yeah, I mean, listen, she did some pretty significant damage to the World War II memorial. Nothing that can't be fixed. But here's my question. So, you know how the left moved a number of years along? It was a number of years ago, right? We don't even really talk about it anymore. But they moved to punish people further under the guise of hate crimes, as if the crime wasn't bad enough as it is. You know, if this was done because somebody was hateful, right? We need to charge more, and that kind of thing, which I always thought was ridiculous. I understand the argument, but at the same time, if it's a crime, it's a crime. Be that as it, and that opens up, a can of worms when it comes to who is deciding what's a hate crime and what's not a hate crime. Be that as it may, we have things like hate crimes. Maybe we should start charging these morons with TDS crimes. So yes, you've been charged with vandalism, but there's an extra charge of also vandalism while suffering from Trump derangement syndrome. I mean, it's kind of like a conservative version of a hate crime. So with that, what would the punishment be? So if you were going to charge somebody under Trump derangement syndrome, what would they, we're looking at restorative justice here, right? Rehabilitation. So how do you go about punishing individuals like that? I was thinking just as a start, and you can force them to watch or listen to the John Justice show. They're already a foe, and we have other foes. It might be a good place to start. It could be a nice little re-education program, insightful, also entertaining. Make them listen before 6 a.m. and they can hear some sweet AI overlord parodies. I'd like to hear your thoughts. John.justice@americanexperiment.org. John.justice@americanexperiment.org. Again, as part of rehabilitation for somebody charged under a fictitious, just made up, extra Trump derangement syndrome charge, what should be part of their rehabilitation? 612-584-4565. Leave us a blast. We'll get to your comments coming up shortly here on the John Justice Show. One more item before we take just a real quick break. Pete Hegseth, Secretary of War Pete Hegseth, friend of the show, he made a trip to Iowa. And it's raising some early questions about 2028. Appearances, right, in Iowa come as Republicans work to hold ground in that state where recent polling has shown tighter races than previous cycles. Now, listen, this could just be Secretary of War Pete Hegseth was traveling to Iowa. It may not, for his own, for the reasons that I'll lay out here in just a moment, may have nothing to do with 2028 presidential aspirations. But it also, there's reason to speculate here. Not the first time that somebody early on ahead of a presidential campaign has spent some time in Iowa. Officials familiar with Hegseth's thinking told the Washington Post that the Iowa visit fits the actions of someone considering a run for the presidency after his time in the Trump administration ends. One of those officials, speaking anonymously, described the trip as something of a test run for a possible 2028 bid. Hegseth had traveled to the state in his personal capacity and appeared with several House and Senate Republicans. The Pentagon confirmed that he traveled aboard a U.S. military aircraft because he is designated as a frequent use, doing that thing with my fingers, traveler. So that status requires Hegseth to use military aircraft for official and personal travel because of the need for secure communications, transportation associated with his national security responsibilities. He appeared on Monday alongside Representative Zach Nunn, out of Iowa, where he praised Nunn and defended continued American involvement in the war in Iran. He also appeared alongside Representative Ashley Hinson, the Republican nominee for an open Senate seat being vacated by the retiring Senator Joni Ernst, and was expected to appear with Representative Miller Meeks as well. The appearances come as Republicans work to hold ground in the state, as I mentioned, where recent polling has shown tighter races than previous cycles. And there was an interesting race in Florida that we'll talk about here in just a moment on the show, where that idiot Vindman was running against a Democrat socialist and he lost. And I have some audio from the DSA member that actually did win that election. Oh, she's a peach. So I'll share that with you coming up in just a moment. At this event, by the way, in Iowa, Pete Hegseth had a rather comical exchange. He almost fell over laughing at a reporter who, as you'll hear in this clip, ended up taking issue with him saying "our boys" in reference to the B-2 pilots involved in recent operations. So why did she take issue with that? Because "our boys" isn't inclusive. What about "our girls"? I'm not even joking. Here's the exchange.
Acknowledge the female pilots that also participated in this mission. The early messages that you sent out only congratulated the boys.
So when I say something like "our boys and bombers," see, this is the kind of thing the press does, right? Of course, the chairman mentioned a female bomber pilot. That's fantastic. She's fantastic. She's a hero. I want more female bomber pilots. I hope the men and women of our country sign up to do such brave and audacious things. But when you spin it as, because I say "our boys and bombers" as a common phrase, I'll keep saying things like that, whether they're men or women. I'm very proud of that female pilot, just like I'm very proud of those male pilots. And I don't care if it's a male or a female in that cockpit, and the American people don't care. But it's the obsession with race and gender in this department that's changed priorities. We don't do that anymore. We don't play your little games. Yes,
so
right there.
For certain that the uranium was removed from the facility before.
By the way, just real quick, I see your comments are already rolling in regarding some suggestions of rehabilitation from somebody who has been charged with a TDS crime. To 612-584-4565. But getting back to Pete Hegseth and the possibility of him running in 2028, can you imagine the debates for just a moment? Let's just I'll just put three names out there. J.D. Vance, Marco Rubio, and Pete Hegseth all on the same stage having a debate. I mean, that would be amazing. That would be absolutely, just to have them all as candidates would be absolutely amazing, especially when you consider who the Democrat nominees might end up being, like your Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez or your Gavin Newsom's. Yes, grab your popcorn. It's going to be a fun ride. All right, we'll get to your comments coming up. Your thoughts on what should we do if there were charges against an individual for suffering from Trump derangement syndrome? How do we go about handling restorative justice? We'll get to your thoughts coming up in just a moment. Also, as I mentioned, this Senate race shocker that unfolded yesterday, stunning upset. Leftist Angie Nixon barely has any money has won the U.S. Senate primary against Alex Vindman. And we'll share some audio with you from this lunatic coming up in just a moment here on the John Justice Show, presented by American Experiment.
All the special interests are represented in St. Paul. But who speaks for you? Center of the American Experiment does. Our policy fellows dig into the tough issues that matter to you and offer common sense solutions on education, taxes, crime, and energy. American Experiment is the trusted, nonpartisan voice of Minnesotans like you. We are working every day to make Minnesota a better, safer, more prosperous place. We are American Experiment. Go to americanexperiment.org to learn more.
And now, here's commentary on the latest issues facing Minnesotans from the hosts, policy fellows, and guests of American Experiment. For more content, head on over to the Center of the American Experiment.org.
By the way, the class of 2025 just posted the worst academic performance on record for a graduating cohort. But wait, that's while they earned, of course, the highest graduation rate ever. Record low academic performance. They can't read at grade level. They can't do math at grade level. The schools aren't teaching them anything, but they're still graduating in record numbers.
It's crazy. They do such a disservice. How do we expect them to be successful? We're just setting them up for failure, which is really sad.
All the special interests are represented in St. Paul. But who speaks for you? Center of the American Experiment does. Our policy fellows dig into the tough issues that matter to you and offer common sense solutions on education, taxes, crime, and energy. American Experiment is the trusted, nonpartisan voice of Minnesotans like you. We are working every day to make Minnesota a better, safer, more prosperous place. We are American Experiment. Go to americanexperiment.org to learn more.
I looked it up, and the percentage of children in poverty in Minnesota is about 10%, which is lower than the national average. So how come somewhere around a third, 33%, say, of children in Minnesota are on Medicaid if they aren't poor?
Sure, my kids are grown now, but I had 3 kids that I raised, and for us, we could make over $100,000 a year, and still our kids would be on Medicaid. If you can imagine that. That's middle class. That's crazy. And, we also as a state, I think we should really measure ourselves by how few people have to rely on the government for health care, not how many. Mm-hmm. But if you ask, Governor Walz, he'll say the more people we feed, the better. The more people on government programs, the better. And that's really how he measures the state. And we really see that in the numbers in Medicaid, which have just exploded.
Think about it. Black and Hispanic students in Mississippi perform better in reading and math than Black and Hispanic students in Minnesota. And Mississippi spends thousands of dollars less per student than Minnesota. Mississippi spends less money, gets better results, and their achievement gaps are closing, while ours are getting worse. Think about it. It's time for real education reform, so Minnesota can catch up to Mississippi. Think About It is brought to you by Center of the American Experiment, Minnesota's think tank.
You have to ask yourself, how in the heck can we be spending that much more money on Medicaid? And we're really looking into that because we think a lot of that money is going to people who are dead, people who live in other states, people who are on more than one program. And you are not surprised because you've seen that on so many different programs in the state of Minnesota. But Medicaid is by far the biggest enchilada when it comes to that.
That blows my mind.
Well, if you leave the state, they still get a check for you every month. And if you are covered by more than one program, or you get married and you're on your husband or wife's plan, they still get a check unless that is circumvented. So they have sort of a very vested interest in not finding you.
Support the John Justice Show. Become an advertiser. Competitive rates for both personal endorsements and standard ads are available. For more details, email john.justice@americanexperiment.org.
It is the John Justice Show, presented by American Experiment. Glad you're with us this morning. A lot of comments have been rolling into the blaster line on the things that we've already discussed since the start of the show. We'll get to your suggestions, talking about the woman who vandalized the World War II memorial, released with restrictions, and since we charge for hate crimes, shouldn't we be charging for Trump derangement syndrome suffering crimes? And what should the punishment be? We'll get to your thoughts here in just a moment. I was also talking about the potential of Pete Hegseth running for office for the presidency in 2028 and my drive in this morning. So let's get to some of your thoughts early on the John Justice Show. And we'll hear from a friend of the show, Andrew, to kick off our comments.
Hey, John, I get running the same thing up on my house with these slow cars. There's a single lane, it's like 55, but these people go like 45 or 50 when you're front, they stay there. And that's like 2 miles, and it splits into 2 lanes, and everybody tries to get around them. Then the car speeds up. It's like they know there's no way to get around them, so they stay slow. It's just nuts.
Yeah, use some better discretion. You know what was tough about that situation driving in, by the way, is that there's nothing you can, that's the hard part is that as a driver in the middle of it, there's nothing that you can do about it. You're stuck, right? It's not like I could make a decision to fix the problem unless you just decide to pull over and let everybody get way out ahead and you don't have to go and deal with it anymore. A friend of the show, Scott, is up early. He wants to talk about the woman who vandalized the World War II memorial on the Scott Con level 1 to 5. Where do we think his enthusiasm is this morning, producer Devin?
3.5.
You're going 3.5? All right. I'm going to say, I'm going to go 5.
Wow.
Yeah, he's talking about a woman suffering from Trump derangement syndrome. I think he's going to be fired up this morning. Let's find out.
Morning, John Devin. I saw that woman. Yes, John. She is that typical left of center crazy person with the tats, etc. What we need to start doing to these people is they need to put them into some sort of 1 or 2 years of hard labor pounding rocks that are larger into smaller rocks or gravel. That'll get their attention. What a bunch of brats.
I'll give it to you. He wasn't quite there. I think it was closer to what you mentioned. Oh, he's entertaining. Friend of the show, Scott, is 612-584-4565 if you want to leave a comment.
Morning, John. Didn't have a President Pete on my bingo card for today, but man, that would be awesome. President Pete Keg's breath and have Roll Out the Barrel playing as he goes into a public gathering just to troll the left so hard. That would be freaking awesome.
That was a really, for the left's ability, considering the left's ability to label things really well. I mean, they do. They play the identity and the label game, better than Republicans do. That being said, the Pete Keg's breath one never really worked for me. It was a bit of a stretch. It's like when people would say, it's John just ass. I get that one a lot. Or as foe of the show, Phil would say, John Injustice. It's like, can you get clever than that? Pete Keg's breath. It doesn't exactly roll off the tongue.
Good morning, John. Daryl, first time calling since your new show. Just a quick thought on the Trump derangement syndrome. If you hate this country enough to damage one of our national monuments, you should lose your voting rights for 10 years.
Oh.
If you are caught voting, you should be penalized as someone who is unable to vote at double the penalty. Thank you.
Boy, I would love to see... It would be interesting to see the court challenges to something like that. I would love to see the back and forth debate over stripping somebody of their voting rights for acting in an unpatriotic way. That would be really interesting to see, to get some lawyers, some scholars. I'd be curious what a friend of the show, James Dickey, has to say about that. He's pretty even keeled in his lawyer expertise. But that would be an interesting one. That would be a very interesting one. Thank you, Daryl, for that. Maybe that's one that we'll save for Freedom Friday. Should have a full house, by the way, for Freedom Friday this week. Looking forward to it. Let's go and hear from, I believe this is Debbie.
Good morning. I think that the punishment should be to listen to President Trump or to watch some of the rallies. Have a good day.
Yeah, thank you for that. I was thinking that as well. I was kind of waiting for somebody to go and bring it up. But that was one of the first thing that I thought of was subject them to President Donald Trump speeches. Or put together like a montage of President Donald Trump being really, really nice to people. complimenting children. That 16-year-old lifeguard who was at the White House earlier this week, put together a compilation of just Trump, the nicest version of Trump possible, because I would imagine that would drive a Trump derangement syndrome sufferer mad. You know, like when they get the terrorists and they strap them all up half naked and they crank out like Metallica Ride the Lightning. These are all fantastic ideas. Best audience ever, by the way.
Hey, John. Brandon. I think they should have to watch every season and episode of The Apprentice back to back with no break. Have a great day.
By the way, do I get my MAGA card stripped if I've never watched The Apprentice? I've never watched it. I don't even think like a portion of a single episode of the Apprentice. Devin, did you ever watch the Apprentice?
No, I never checked it out.
Yeah. You know, honestly, I don't even, I'm so unfamiliar. I'm like, I know The Apprentice. I know that Trump hosted it and I know there are other hosts later on. But now that I think about it, I don't even really know what the baseline of the whole show is, to be honest with you. I've never watched it. So does that not make me MAGA? Am I not MAGA anymore? Am I going to have that stripped from me? Continue your comments rolling in of what the punishment should be against those charged with a crime suffering from Trump derangement syndrome. You don't have to answer the other one. I was just being silly. Let's go back to the blaster.
Hey, John. It sounds like you have a wonderful opportunity to start an intervention service that could be funded by, Medicaid or something to take care of these CDS sufferers.
You know, if we did end up moving forward with legislation to charge individuals for crimes while suffering from Trump derangement syndrome, we'd have to come up with another terminology. We'd have to come up with something a little bit more official than Trump derangement syndrome. I'll have to I'll workshop that. I'll put it forward to the AI overlords and see if they can't come up with something. We'll continue to take your thoughts regarding what the punishment should be for those suffering from Trump derangement syndrome who commit a crime. I do want to get to this Senate race in Florida here in just a moment. Before I do, though, let me remind you that if you are dealing with extra weight, you're carrying around the pounds, you'd like to lose the weight. However, you know how difficult it is, especially if you've gone through the weight loss process before, only to have the weight come back on, the yo-yo dieting. I dealt with that for years, for many, many years, ever since I started to put weight on as I got older, because it gets more difficult to keep the weight off. And what really needs to happen is you need to change your relationship with food. And that's a difficult thing to do, especially for people like me, because I love food. It's often a comfort for me. The program at NutraWave, it solves all of that. And that's not even what it's designed to do. NutraWave is designed to turn on the fat burning, reigniting your energy, all natural, no pills and no shots. But through the process of going through this program, not only have I now dropped over 27 pounds, I'm losing more weight every single day as I'm doing a second round on this program. This is officially, as I've said, the thinnest that I've ever been while with Melinda. Which is pretty awesome. I do have a lot more energy. I am sleeping better at night. A lot of that has to do with the mini leaf night gummies as well. But it's made a huge difference just in everyday life, not lugging around that extra 27 pounds. But in the program, you actually end up changing your relationship with food. I went through my first round. I lost 22 pounds while on the program. And then I went off the program and went back to not dieting. And I didn't put a single pound back on because my relationship with food has changed. 31,000 people have taken advantage of this across the metro, have also gone and achieved success. And right now, NutraWave is accepting a limited number of people to take advantage of a $272 valued Truth Metabolic session and a red light therapy session, just for calling and finding out what the program is all about. There's no pressure. Just give Dr. Bob a call at NutraWave, and he will let you know exactly what this program entails. And I cannot say enough good things about it, even though I continue to try. So 952-260-1965, that's the number, 952-260-1965. Mention the word strike when you call, And again, if you are one of the individuals who calls early enough, you could take advantage of this almost $300 free value for just checking out the program. And I encourage you to do so. Just learn what it entails and think about it. You start now, and by the time we get into the holidays, and I'm talking about like Halloween, you could be a brand new you heading into Halloween to Thanksgiving and Christmas. It could be just a fantastic holiday season without carrying around all that extra weight. NUTRIWAVE.us. There's nothing else like it. Results may vary. NutriWave is not a medical treatment, and consult your physician before starting any weight loss program. Now, let's get back to some of your thoughts here on the John Justice Show, presented by American Experiment.
Good morning, John. I think the punishment should be on repeat. God Bless the USA,
okay.
YMCA, and Country Road, Take Me Home.
Aww.
Just on repeat, over and over.
You know, if you're looking to rehabilitate a Trump derangement syndrome sufferer, that's a good way to do it. Speaking of those suffering from Trump derangement syndrome, let's go back to the blaster line this morning. Here on the John Justice Show, presented by American Experiment.
Hey, good morning. This is Eric from Brainerd. Yes, please, please, please run Hegseth for president. The man who lied about how many interceptors we've wasted on the Iran war, 25% defending Israel. By the way, my source for that is the Center for Strategic International Studies, which is a war hawk think tank that actually tracks this. So not a liberal think tank or source on that actual. Yeah, I'm wondering if on stage he'll get drunk and yell "kill all Muslims" like he did in the past and wasted in a hotel lobby, or if he'll abuse a woman and pay her off because Me Too is coming back or whatever.
Did you get all that from the Center of Strategic International Studies too, or just from your other left-wing rags?
Absolutely flawed candidate, and with the failing Iran war, which is our new Vietnam. Yeah, we'll see. I'll leave another fact-based voicemail about the fraud later this morning with some actual facts.
Yeah, I'm done. Thank you, foes of the show, for leaving your comments. Much appreciated. No thoughts on the Trump derangement syndrome crime charges? Their voice disguised to Eric from Brainerd. I'm a little bit disappointed in you, but thank you for leaving a comment nonetheless.
I think that woman that vandalized the World War II memorial should be cleaning it up herself.
Yeah, I do too.
And then someone should be watching her, making sure she gets every inch of that filth off of that, and make her think about what she's done. Well, maybe playing some John Justice while she's cleaning it up.
I like the added angle in there of the let them think about their crimes. The left's always about that, right? Got to think upon this. Got to have listening sessions. We're going to reflect on this, right? Anytime there's a tragedy, there's a lot of reflecting going on from those on the left. All right, one more, and we'll dive into this Senate race in Florida. Let's hear from another friend of the show this morning.
I don't think there should be a penalty attached when there's a Trump derangement syndrome problem attached to a crime, because it's a sickness, and they should be forced to get treatment instead, because they're a hateful, hostile, malignant person, and there's something wrong in their mind, so they need.
Yeah. Well, having some fun with it and not getting too dark, because that was getting a little dark. Either way, Bob, I do appreciate your comment this morning. 612-584-4565. So as I mentioned, it was a stunning upset. Alex Vindman was fighting in a primary in Florida against a self-proclaimed leftist DSA member, Angie Nixon. Here is some of the reporting, I believe, from CNN over what was a shocker on the left.
In the Democratic primary for the United States Senate in Florida, this one is a monster of an upset. Vindman raised a ton of money, came into this with a ton of national name recognition, national support in this race. And the hope of Democrats that he could make this, we're going to do news now here in a second, that he could make this a fight, put Florida on the map nationally. Instead, Angie Nixon from the left has defeated him handily in this primary. About to do the news now hit.
Listen, the Democrat Party is the party of the DSA now. We are the Democrat Party now. They're the party of the DSA now. This is just another example of that. When you have these low turnout primaries and you have ground games organized by those that align themselves with the Democrat Socialists of America, these communists, they already have great ground games to work from because of what they do already in terms of their protesting. And so because of that, in these races in Florida, in these races across the country, as I've said on the show, the further you are from President Donald Trump, the more likely you are to win a primary election. Now, the general election is a completely different story, which is why Democrats are upset that this individual ended up winning over Vindman. Vindman's a lunatic anyways, but he's a darling on the left. I'm sure he's taking this loss well. This Angie Nixon is more than likely going to be a fairly easy win against the GOP challenger in the general. But this is where the Democrat Party has landed, and this is another example of that. So who is this woman? Well, she's made the rounds recently. We'll go here first. She, of course, falls right in line with the rest of the DSA platform.
Some of the agenda includes things that have been controversial, things you did not name, by the way, in what is most important to you and the voters of Florida, including defunding police or abolishing prisons. Because those are part of the platform that the DSA officially agenda has talked about, do you support those or want to be distanced from those in people's consideration?
So I want to be clear. There are things that are a part of the Democratic, clearly, platform.
Listen, everybody has crutches. I certainly have my fair share on the show, things that you say over and over again, word fillers and things like that. This whole, let me be clear, that one needs to go away. Typically, when you have any Democrat saying, let me be clear, usually it means whatever is coming out of their mouth next is either ridiculous or a lie.
Platform, since Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer are not supportive of Medicare for all, which should be a right for folks to have access to quality health care. I want to abolish for-profit prisons because I believe right now people aren't educating our children and they're ushering them into the school to prison pipeline because they want to exploit labor. They're enhancing penalties because they want cheap labor. And so those are some of the things that I am supportive of.
So she supports abolishing prisons and then letting criminals back out onto the streets of Florida. As if Florida already didn't have its fair share of crazy individuals. It doesn't stop there, though. No. I have one more. In a subsequent interview, she also talked about drag shows and how she doesn't understand what the big deal is about drag shows, especially when it comes to children.
I don't understand, there's no sexualization at a drag show. It's just people dressing up and singing and performing. I've taken my children to drag shows and it's fun. It's entertainment. It's wholesome entertainment. Yes. And it's nothing wrong. It's just I don't get it.
Yeah, you clearly don't get it. A drag queen. So I wanted to, I had my own counter to this when I saw it, but I wanted to get some official language, right? So the whole term drag, I wasn't aware of this until I went looking it up. It was a 1971 article in Lee Brewster's Drag Queens magazine that described a drag queen as a homosexual transvestite who was hyper feminine, flamboyant, and militant. Drag queens, further described as having an attitude of superiority, commonly courted by heterosexual men who would not ordinarily participate in homosexual relationships. While the term drag queen implied to homosexual transvestite, the term drag carried no such connotations. A drag queen is a person, usually male, dresses in clothing and makeup to imitate and often exaggerate female gender signifiers and gender roles for experimental purposes. Historically, drag queens, again, have usually been gay men and have been a part of the gay culture. I only bring all of that up because does that sound like something that children should be involved in? young children whose brains aren't fully developed yet and haven't been exposed to anything and shouldn't be exposed to anything of a sexual nature? Does that sound like something that's appropriate for children? I know I don't need to convince you of that. I just wanted to go through this little exercise. And let me add one more thing to that. You could take children to literally anything else that is appropriate. That's the other part of this whole thing. Often when we get into these debates and arguments over these issues and you hear ridiculous statements coming from these communists like this Angie Nixon, and I don't see what the big deal is when it comes to taking a child to a drag show. There's nothing sexual about it. Give me a break already. Okay. But even before you go down the road of arguing whether or not a drag show is or isn't appropriate for children, just stop and go, can you not think of 1, 2, 3 better places to go and take a child for entertainment purposes before you even get to one that could be deemed controversial? I mean, go to a circus, for crying out loud, before you, if you want to see them entertained by colorful individuals who are gallivanting around, at least do it in a place where it is actually designed for children. And there's animals and stuff involved. If you want to leave a comment, 612-584-4565. Again, 612-584-4565. That is the Blaster line. You can also email me, john.justice@americanexperiment.org. We'll get to some of your thoughts here in just a moment. I do have, though, further drag show-related news relevant to you to share with you this morning. So you know the Minnesota State Fair is coming up, right? Devin, where do you land on the state fair typically? Is this something that you and your significant other like to go and attend?
I haven't been in a few years, but I do enjoy it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say I go out of my way to make it every year, but
why haven't you gone recently? Just haven't wanted to, or just haven't had the time?
Just haven't had the time, really.
Catherine and Grace on this week's American Experiment podcast talk a little bit about this. Catherine, by the way, the wild card on Freedom Fridays, huge fan of the fair. Yeah, she is probably the biggest defender that I know of the Minnesota State Fair, to the point where I think I'm gonna rankle her on Friday a little bit, maybe get into some fair conversations. We will be at the Minnesota State Fair coming up on Saturday the 29th. I will be there 11 until 1. So I hope that you make plans to come and join American Experiment and come on by and see me. I think we're going to have some Freedom Friday people there. I believe Catherine and Grace will be there. But 11 to 1 in at the Center of the American Experiment booth, which is located near the grandstand. On Saturday the 28th, make plans to come and join us. I bring all of this up because Drag Review is going to be performing this year at the Minnesota State Fair for the first time as part of the Arts Affair program. This is a bi-POC-focused review founded by Kevin Billups, also known as Lala, Luzius. Luzius? Luscious? It's got to be Luscious. Luzius? Yeah. Lala Luscious. But they just spelled it with a Z because it's more street that way. It's more drag that way. Maybe. I don't know. It aims to amplify inclusive entertainment and showcase the diversity of Minnesota's drag scene at the Minnesota State Fair. Fantastic, right? I have some further details on this I'll share with just a moment. Let's get back to some of your thoughts from the Blaster line this morning here on the John Justice Show, presented by American Experiment.
Good morning, John. Rich here. So we're talking about kids being exposed to drag queens and this agenda of the left. Now, did Minnesota pass a new law called anti-grooming? So wouldn't this be considered grooming, taking children to such things like this? And you should be charged in Minnesota now, if I'm correct.
Well, it depends on what they're putting under the grooming laws. And I don't think that this ends up following under the grooming laws for the very reason that, and Angie Nixon, the DSA primary winner in the Senate race in Florida, talked about. I don't see how there's any problem with it. On the left, they don't see this as grooming at all. Getting back to the state fair, crafts of all kinds, looking at the article here, abound at the Minnesota State Fair, but the jaw-dropping art of drag has long been left off the list. Oh, boy. However, did the fair go on without having drag shows up until now? It's unbelievable. That's right. Power, drag review. That's the official name. Power, drag review. We'll close out the first 2 days of the Arts Affair program. That's apostrophe fair program, celebrating their distinction as the first drag production company selected to perform at the fair. So the variety shows 4 performances for anybody that was curious: 3:30, 4:30, 5:30, 6:30. I think it'd be very busy. There's a lot of very busy drag queens. On August 27th and 28th, oh, they're not going to be there the day we're going to be there. What a disappointment. I'm so sad. We should move our day so we can be there when the drag queens perform. A unique blend of comedy, dance, and music. They're going to express themselves through the art of dance. The exuberant melody of genre and culture in its own right, Arts Affair promotes pop-up performances that sweep across the fairgrounds and speak to the diversity of Minnesota artistry. Introducing the joy of drag to the great Minnesota get-together will be a milestone for self-expression and an incredible honor. This is according to Lala Luscious, director of Power, drag review. I wonder if I can get him to perform here on the show. I don't think we have this. I mean, we certainly have the lighting for it. I don't think we have the space for it, though. We can get them all lined up we can at least get 4 drag queens on the comfy chairs and the sofa here at the American Experiment studio. And we could talk about Power, drag review. The By POC Focus musical sketch was founded by Lala Luscious. And again, if you think I'm saying that wrong, please tell me. It's Luzious. Luzious. So am I missing? I'm really bad at this. If you don't know, I'm really bad when it comes to fancy names like this. For those that have been listening to the show long enough, you know the whole Mr. Zer Polaris Razor debacle on that Freedom Friday, where I didn't know that it was pronounced razor. So if you think that it's something other than luscious of Luzious, let us know. However, Lala says the goal of expanding opportunities in the Twin Cities for historically underrepresented queer performers and artists. That's Power, drag review regularly hosts events at other locations that you don't need to know about. And then they get further into what this all entails. And quite honestly, I don't care nearly that much, apart from sharing the story with you and hearing from you on the blaster line this morning is 612-584-4565.
Oh my God, I am so sick of these idiots. Healthcare is a right. No, it's not. Let's illustrate it. 2 people need emergency surgery. The next 15 minutes, there's 1 surgeon. Guess what? Somebody's going to die. That means it's not a right. It depends on an externality. A right does not depend on anything else. It exists. It doesn't require anything from anybody.
Were we talking? Did I miss I appreciate the comment as always from the friend of the show, but did I miss? Were we talking about healthcare at some point? I don't. It would be odd if he was listening to another show and he left that, because that's kind of a leap. So maybe he'll let me in on. I like his comments on healthcare. I just don't believe we were talking about healthcare. Hey, friend of the show, lawyer James Dickey answered the call, as I hoped that he would, and left us a blast.
Hey, John, James Dickey here. On your question about the voting right removal for defacing a federal monument, well, state law determines when someone might lose their voting rights if they commit a felony. And if you deface a federal monument and it's a felony, then under the laws of your state, you have those rights removed. And, as we all know, the Minnesota Constitution says that if you've been convicted of a felony, you can't vote until your civil rights are restored. And, the trifecta tried to change that, of course, but I think the Constitution's supreme here in Minnesota.
Awesome. James Dickey, thank you so much for the comments. I greatly appreciate it, and on the fly as well. 612-584-4565 if you would like to comment on the topics here on the show.
The DSA platform is incoherent. The people that are advocating for this now are college-educated, high school indoctrinated. people, the black community is going to see through this at some point, look at it and say, none of this stuff is here for us. And the Democrat Party is going to come back in, old standard Democrat Party, come back in and save the day. The DSA is just simply a trial run for the DFL in Minnesota and for the national Democrat parties to test the waters to see how far they can push policies and agendas.
By the way, to your point of the black community seeing through this at some point, we're already seeing this happen. You know, I've heard from many individuals, and not just the people that you hear on the show, but I've heard from many individuals within the black community. They are already identifying what it is that you're mentioning. We're always going to have two parties in this country. There's always going to be two major parties in this country. Perhaps on a long enough timeline, you know, long after you and I are gone and our children are probably our age, maybe there'll be the emergence of perhaps, say, the Libertarian Party rising up, or perhaps we'd even go and see what's happening right now where the Democrat Party ends up just becoming the Democrat Socialist Party of America and the Democrat Party doesn't exist anymore. I don't believe that's going to happen. I firmly believe that everything happens for a reason. God has a plan. And while we have to continue to stay in this fight, we have to continue to call out what we see are bad policies, bad ideologies, those laws being pushed forward or beliefs that run counter to societal norms and what made this country great. So none of what I'm about to say means that we just need to sit back and say, hey, you know what? Don't worry about it. God's got it handled, right? God does have it handled, but we still have a job to do here as human beings on this planet. I say all that because I do firmly believe that everything that we're going through right now here in the country is by purpose and design. And what I pray happens is that we're seeing, and over the course of these election cycles, and, you know, I predicted this, others predicted this, that what you see is this further lurch to the left that's happened every single election cycle. Whereas the right, you've seen it a little bit, but not nearly to what you've seen happening on the left. The left wants to make it look like the right has lurched really far right, but it really isn't the case. You either have your conservatives and then you have individuals on the right that everybody believes are rhinos. And typically those are just moderate people that share differences on a handful of key views of conservatives and Republicans. No, what we're seeing on the left right now is the most extreme leftists that are getting into positions to run for primaries. And some of them might even win. But I believe eventually the United States of America is going to reject all that. The Democrat Party is going to have to reject all that if they want to be viable. And we're already seeing pushback. And you're beginning to see those anecdotal stories, as we talked about on Monday's show, when you have the governor of Maryland, or you have Ro Khanna, or you have Hakeem Jeffries being asked about the platforms of the DSA. And they're pushing back on them, saying they don't support them, or they don't support defunding the police. The police, or the other communist policies that individuals like Angie Nixon, who won that primary in Florida, go and believe. Now, there's nothing to say that if it becomes, you know, the platform of the Democrat Party, that this won't end up being solidified in the Democrat Party. But I believe that there are too many individuals within the Democrat Party that are sitting back going, we cannot allow this to happen. So all of that is to say that what I pray happens. And if you ask me, well, what do you think God is doing in all of this? No, I think that there is we're going through some pain right now so that we can get back to a place in this country where we have two different parties that aren't co-opted by a bunch of radical organizations. There's going to be disagreements between Democrats and Republicans. It's always going to be that way. But hopefully we can get back to a place where at least people are being rational on the issues that we typically went and agreed on. As I've mentioned many times before, back to a place where we have Democrats that sound like Republicans today because they used to believe the same thing that Republicans do on those particular issues, and there was common ground to be found that just can't be found today. That's where things need to get back to. Unfortunately, the way that things are so polarized here in the country right now, the only way that we can end up getting back to that, in my opinion, is to go through the difficulties that we are currently enduring. Coming up, we were talking voting a moment ago, so I'm going to move one of my stories up in the stack. Activists from the Citizen Justice League, which is formerly Project Veritas, we've been talking about now for the week, may be facing legal consequences for impersonating Minnesota voters during the primary elections. The group, as we've discussed, tested Minnesota's voter vouching law, filmed themselves posing as voters, including using fake identities. This is illegal in Minnesota, and now the state's actually looking about bringing charges. Classic, right? Listen, if there's charges against these individuals, people need to abide by the law. I think they've done a lot of good in exposing just how ridiculous the voter vouching law is here in Minnesota. But if there's charges that they need to face and they're legitimate, they should face them. Just like anybody who's protesting, regardless of political party. I just find it rich that the state doesn't care about voter fraud, won't share our voter rolls, and yet if somebody goes and exposes our laws the way that they did, they are going to go after them as hard as they possibly can. Also, Scott Presler, speaking of voting, right, who's done for increasing voting past elections. He ended up going back in time from a handful of years ago and found a couple of videos, and I'll share the audio with you, of election training here in Minnesota that lays out exactly what James O'Keefe and Cam Higbee were exposing in the primary last week. We'll get to that here in just a moment on the John Justice Show. Remember, if you need to get a good night's sleep, do what I do. Take a Mini Leaf Night Gummy. They're available at MINNELEAF.com. That's MiniLeaf.com. And Mini Leaf is locally run by Eric and his wife, and their mission is for you to live a better life through their products, whether it's the night gummies, the Triple Diamond Pain Cream, whether it's the fun gummies. And also, I want to mention, too, that Mini Leaf, they keep it local. All the packaging for the gummies, the fun gummies, the night gummies, it's all packaged here locally. As a matter of fact, in Brooklyn Park, where I was talking about my travel woes on the drive in this morning. Also, the Mini Leaf tonics are brewed here in Eden Prairie. So Mini Leaf is dedicated to keeping it local when creating and packaging and sending out the amazing products that you can go and find at MINNELEAF.com. That's MiniLeaf.com. Head on over to the website and taste happy at MiniLeaf.com.
And now here's commentary on the latest issues facing Minnesotans from the hosts, policy fellows, and guests of American Experiment. For more content, head on over to the center of the American Experiment's YouTube page or at americanexperiment.org.
It's so upsetting to see our leaders, like Governor Walz, gaslighting us, basically, and saying, no, things are going great. We are one of the best states in the country. Then why are people leaving? And why are people struggling? And why are people saying that Minnesota's on the wrong track?
Yeah, that is such a good point. I mean, it's just every day you realize, like, you talk to people who say it's just so hard in Minnesota right now. And then we have people at the top who are completely denying that there's any problem whatsoever.
Think about it. Minnesota has always been a low-crime state. But according to the most recent Bureau of Criminal Apprehension data, we are now above the national average when it comes to Part 1 crimes, a category that includes crimes like murder, assault, rape, and carjackings. Think about it. Minnesota is now a high-crime state. Visit highcrimemn.com to learn more. Think About It is brought to you by Center of the American Experiment, Minnesota's think tank.
John Phelan has this incredible chart posted at americanexperiment.org where he plotted out the CNBC ranking of best states to live in and the states that people are actually moving to and away from. It's a negative correlation. People don't want to live in states with these policies that CNBC, the great authority on this and that Governor Walz is touting, sees as, the ultimate factors in, high quality of life. It's just a joke.
I mean, that's the actual data we should be looking at, is where people are moving. People move with their feet. Where are they going? They're going to red states with better policy.
Hey, it's John Justice, and you know how important it is for me to get a good night's sleep before every show. If you're having trouble catching those Z's, let me introduce you to the solution. Mini Leaf's Night Gummies. These gummies are crafted with natural ingredients to help you unwind and enjoy a restful night's sleep. Trust me, just take one before you go to bed, and you'll wake up feeling rejuvenated. Remember, it's MINNELEAF.com. Head on over to MiniLeaf.com right now and get your sleep back on track.
If you would like to support the John Justice Show, become an advertiser. Competitive rates for both personal endorsements and standard ads are available. For more details, email john.justice@americanexperiment.org.
Think about it. A famous politician once said, "You're entitled to your opinion, but you are not entitled to your own facts." But in a world full of AI and fake news, where can Minnesotans find the facts? Center of the American Experiment is Minnesota's go-to source for fact-based analysis and common sense solutions for taxes, energy, public safety, and our kids' education. Visit americanexperiment.org for more information. Think About It is brought to you by Center of the American Experiment, Minnesota's think tank.
The best part of waking up is knowing Kamala lost to Trump.
And it's the second hour of the John Justice Show presented by American Experiment. Remember, you can watch the show at MN Think Tank on X, also on Facebook and YouTube at Center of the American Experiment, and my personal pages there as well. Download the MIXLR, the MixLR app, and you can listen to the show there live, and also listen to the podcast if you miss any portion of today or any show. Those are also available across all podcast platforms, and I'm glad you're with us live this morning. We have Ryan Wilson, Lieutenant Governor candidate with Lisa Damas campaign, joining us on the couch. Coming up at 7:30 this morning at 8:15, Liz Collin from Alpha News will be checking in to talk about this bombshell move by Derek Chauvin's lawyers regarding controversy surrounding the grand jury that may or may not have convened regarding the trial of Derek Chauvin. So we'll talk with Liz Collin coming up at 8:15, and then have a really interesting conversation with an individual who wants to expose the Minnesota Public Utilities Commission and how they spend taxpayer dollars to travel overseas for their Minnesota Public Utilities Commission work. And so we'll get into that. Eric Lippman will be joining us also on the American Experiment sofa coming up at 8:30 this morning. Mentioned a moment ago, the activists who filmed themselves posing as Minnesota voters during the primary elections may be in legal trouble. The man in the video who falsely identified himself as William Pomeranz, real name is James O'Keefe, may have put himself in legal jeopardy. David Schultz, a constitutional law professor, says it's illegal in the state of Minnesota to impersonate another voter, and this is apparently what O'Keefe did. If only they cared as much about voter fraud as they do when somebody goes and attempts to expose our laws and how they make us susceptible to voter fraud. Schultz, Pomeranz, and the Minnesota Secretary of State, Steve Simon, say the video shows the system worked. As I read the law, you can't impersonate another registered voter, and that's exactly what they appear to have filmed themselves doing, said Simon. Impersonating a Minnesota voter at a polling place is a felony, punishable by a maximum 7 years in prison and a fine up to $20,000. Although he didn't go and vote, so he stopped short of that. So it'll be interesting if the non-move, the move to not go and vote, trying to find a way to word that, is enough to keep him from avoiding any sort of penalties regarding this. And as I mentioned, listen, if he broke the law, he broke the law. And often that's what happens when you go and do stunts like this, activism like this, regardless of political affiliation. Those on the left, typically, though, are never willing to go and actually deal with the consequences of their actions. I would hope that James O'Keefe, if he is found legitimately to have committed a crime, that he's willing to go and accept whatever punishment that entails, because that's a part of what activism is. He exposed something that we talked about is legal here in Minnesota, but just because it's legal, it doesn't make it right. And it does make us susceptible, in my opinion, to fraud. I shared a lengthy piece from the Federalist earlier in the week laying out what's been happening in California and how they have no means to even track individuals here in the country illegally, non-citizens, if they were to go and vote, wherein in California, they have plenty of other mechanisms in place to track other potential ways that people can commit voter fraud. But conveniently, when it comes to those here in the country illegally, there is no system of tracking that. And I'd be very curious if we're dealing with the same thing here in Minnesota. Keeping with the theme here on the John Justice Show presented by American Experiment, Scott Pressler unearthed some footage of a Minnesota election training employee telling everybody to not ask for ID. Here is the audio from one of these videos. So I'll paint the picture here. It's a woman standing in front of a table, and she's got a green background. It's slightly out of frame. It looks exactly like you would expect a government education training employee video to look and to sound.
Ask them for their name and address. Do not ask a voter to look at the roster themselves to locate their name. Do not ask them to see an identification card. However, if a voter presents identification, thank the voter and inform them that an identification card is not required if they are registered.
Okay, so stop the tape. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely we go under Democrat rule. We go out of our way to try to keep our elections as open to fraud as possible. That's the only way that I will interpret this. I'm sorry. We go out of our way to allow individuals who are non-citizens here to vote. Yes, I know. We have safeguards, and we have safeguards doing that thing with my fingers that are supposed to be in place. I get it. Okay. However, all the way that along every step that we get to actually holding people accountable if they do go commit fraud because they're not legal citizens, we basically keep the border wide open for them to get to the point where they'll commit their illegal activity. But we're supposed to trust the government here in Minnesota that if they go and take advantage of that which we have provided to them, then we'll hold them accountable. Give me a break. Just like we held accountable all the individuals who stole billions of dollars here in Minnesota, just like how the individuals working within the Minnesota state government that saw the year-over-year massive millions upon millions of dollar increase in funding going to these organizations that were sending in their proof of services provided to get the Medicaid dollars, your tax dollars, just like we ignored all of those for years, which led to the $9 billion in fraud. You understand.
This announcement is not only for the voter in front of you, but for other voters in line who should not feel required to produce an identification card. In some circumstances, the identification card might be helpful, but make it clear that it is not required. The voter may say that they have a difficult name to spell and provide their identification to make the process easier to find their name. Or a voter might have problems speaking, and so the identification serves as their way of communicating their name and address. Once you know the name and address of the voter, and you are using a paper roster, search and find the voter's name, check the page for any roster notations, hide challenges on other voter records from view, have the voter confirm their name and address, point to the oath at the top of the roster page, and have them review the oath. Instruct the voter to sign their name on the line of the roster page to affirm the voter's oath. Give them a voter receipt and direct them to the ballot judge. Now, if an
The oath is the stupidest thing ever. The oath is so dumb. It is the quintessential style over substance. But we made him take an oath. They're not going to go and break the oath because Democrats never lie, right? Those that are commit. Has there ever been in the history of any election whatsoever an individual who went to go and commit voter fraud, knowing they were going to, went to go and vote at a polling place to go and commit their voter fraud, but they saw the oath and they went, oh, gosh darn it. I was so close. But there's an oath, and I'm an honorable person, and I will not now commit that voter fraud. And they turned around and walked out. Yeah, that's never
electronic
happened.
roster is used. Search and find the voter's name, ask the voter to confirm their name and address, and have the voter review the voter's oath. Instruct the voter to sign to affirm the voter's oath.
By the way, that music, that pleasant music in the background is the official soundtrack to committing voter fraud. I just want to let you know. Those that go and commit voter fraud, that's the sound that they have in their head. They have it on their playlist. I don't know if you were aware of that.
As the judge, you will retain the signed voter signature certificate, issue a ballot receipt to the voter, and direct the voter to the ballot judge. Please note that the signature may be electronic on the screen or on paper, so follow your local election official instructions.
Sometimes it is difficult to find a voter's name. Check for spelling errors or...
Did they all high five? Good job. Good job, Pam. Way to go. You nailed that video. It was awesome. So informative. Let's get your thoughts from the blaster line this morning.
Morning, John. I am an election judge, so I've been through all these trainings, and it is horrific, the vouching. Even where I'm at in Plymouth, homeless people can vote. They just got to tell us whatever. That's legal too, by the way, everyone. So this year for primary, I went in, had my ID. I took it out, and I just set it on the scanner thing, and I said, we're going to do this registration my way. I did happen to know the election judge that was sitting there, but I know the other two that were next to that person were kind of looking, and I'm like, I do it my way. And if anybody hands me a license, I take it and I scan it and I say it goes a whole lot faster this way. So have a great day.
Other types of Election Day registration options include a registered voter in that precinct who can personally vouch for the identity and residence of up to 8 new voters. A healthcare facility worker can vouch for an unlimited number of residents of facilities that they work for, regardless of where that facility worker lives. A voter...
Stop the tape. You heard that right. A healthcare facility worker can vouch for an unlimited number of residents of facilities that they work for, regardless of where that facility worker lives. That was an election judge training video for Carver County.
A voter can use a notice of late registration sent to them. If a voter is moved within their precinct or has only changed their name, they may use their previous registration in the precinct. For college students, precincts may be provided with a list of...
That still is unbelievable to me. Unlimited. And again, the follow-up here, it is argued that there are safeguards in place to make sure that people don't go and game the system. And if they do, you know, there's a process, and there is a process. I'm not denying that. There is a process. Somebody gets vouched for when it comes to going and voting, and then they're supposed to go through a process of verification. And somewhere along that way, if they are verified to not be eligible to vote, then something is supposed to happen. But I have not been able to find out whether or not we've ever removed votes from an actual election after they've been counted because somebody ended up fraudulently being vouched for and it was discovered. I have not seen it. It may have happened. I hope that it's happened. But before we even get to that place, and this is the whole point that I wanted to share with you this morning, before we even get into that level where we are actually going to go and have to double check these individuals who have been vouched for, we shouldn't have the vouching in the first place. Before we get to arguing over the oath and the IDs, we shouldn't be not requiring IDs in the first place. Let me put it a much simpler way. You wouldn't need to take all these extra steps if we didn't create a situation where you had to go and create all these extra steps. That's what the Democrats have done. That's what we need to do to shore up our elections. Get rid of this ridiculous vouching rule of 8 people and unlimited if you're working at a healthcare facility. Get rid of this ridiculous, you don't have to have an ID and don't dare go and ask somebody for their ID. And if somebody shows you their ID, tell them they don't have to show an ID. But remember, everybody, they're taking an oath. Before we even get to that, let's get rid of all of that, because then you don't need all the extra steps. Then you don't have to worry about whether or not somebody within the government is going to be doing their job, making the paltry pay that they're being paid, probably hating their job. We're not going to be dependent on government employees to track down individuals to ensure that they are all legally voting in our elections. How many of those people are also Democrats and don't give a rip? Because they know that more than likely 99.999% of the time, if somebody's going committing an act of voter fraud, it's going to be a Democrat or somebody who's voting for Democrats. So it is absolutely asinine that we're even at the place where we are opening ourselves up for potential fraud and then having to be dependent on the government to make sure, hey, but don't worry, we'll double check all these people to make sure they are voting legitimately in our elections. Give me a break. All right, coming up ahead of my conversation with Lieutenant Governor candidate Ryan Wilson, who'll be joining us in the studio. I got a couple of Minneapolis stories for you. Minneapolis is asking for help after 5 copper wire thefts hit street lights. And in the middle of while Minneapolis continues to go and deal with a lot of real issues facing the people of Minneapolis, from crime to these thefts taking place, a lot of good the laws from the legislature barring the resale of these precious metals did, right? But in the midst of all of this, wait until you hear what the Minneapolis City Council has been focused on this week. It's not as ridiculous as decriminalizing bathhouses, but it's pretty darn close. I'll give you details next here on the John Justice Show. And remember, if you're looking to go and lose the weight, maybe, right, your old self is disappointed in your new self because you haven't been taking care of yourself. You've put on a lot of weight, and it's causing stress in your life. And it's one of the most unhealthy things that you can do for your body is to carry around the extra weight. If you've gone through the yo-yo dieting before, the NutraWave program is designed for you. Get your confidence back and get your life back. Make life easier once again without having to carry around all that excess weight. With NutraWave, there's no pills, there's no shots. And for over 13 years, thousands of men and women have lost the weight just like me. I've lost about 25 pounds on this program. It's amazing. It's changed my relationship with food for the better. And I still, when I'm not on the program, get to eat the food that I want to eat. Right now, spots are limited, but you can get a free $272 valued Truth Metabolic Scan and a red light therapy session. You've got nothing to lose. All you have to do is mention the word strike when you call 952-260-1965. That's 952-260-1965. Mention the word strike, and that potential $300 gift for just finding out about the program is yours absolutely free. Call Dr. Bob today. Call NutraWave, NutriWave.us. No pills, no shots. Individual results may vary.
All the special interests are represented in St. Paul. But who speaks for you? Center of the American Experiment does. Our policy fellows dig into the tough issues that matter to you and offer common sense solutions on education, taxes, crime, and energy. American Experiment is the trusted, nonpartisan voice of Minnesotans like you. We are working every day to make Minnesota a better, safer, more prosperous place. We are American Experiment. Go to americanexperiment.org to learn more.
And now, here's commentary on the latest issues facing Minnesotans. From the hosts, policy fellows, and guests of American Experiment. For more content, head on over to the center of the American Experiment's YouTube page or at americanexperiment.org.
This woman
I didn't know
has had a bunch of credible allegations going back years to when she worked for the city. She's been doing this behavior, right?
This is the St. Paul mayor who's now under investigation, and we'll get to the details here in a moment.
She used to be with St. Paul working as staff, and she had this falling out with a friend who filed a harassment restraining order against her.
So, St. Paul Mayor Cowley Herr under investigation, sexual harassment following complaints from the police chief Axel Henry. I get that reversed. The investigation going on since April involves inappropriate text messages and other alleged incidents, raising concerns about transparency and the use of personal devices for government business. Herr has stated her commitment to cooperating with the investigation. What's interesting about her statement that she released on Wednesday, there was no denial at all. She took the stance of, people just don't understand my humor, my sexy humor. I'm adding the sexy part in, but that's what it is.
Think about it. A famous politician once said, "You're entitled to your opinion, but you are not entitled to your own facts." But in a world full of AI and fake news, where can Minnesotans find the facts? Center of the American Experiment is Minnesota's go-to source for fact-based analysis and common sense solutions for taxes, energy, public safety, and our kids' education. Visit americanexperiment.org for more information. Think About It is brought to you by Center of the American Experiment, Minnesota's think tank.
There was just a video that went viral the other day of Nick Shirley talking to a woman in New York who had been sexually assaulted. And she said, I would rather that person doesn't spend the rest of their life in jail, and I don't have an answer of how to do that. But I don't even think they should even go to jail because our jail system is so messed up. And he was like, well, then how do you stop it from happening? Well, I don't really have an answer. Go back to Mayor Lynch, mayor of whatever county is that the same type of logic can be employed, that you're looking at, well, they were convicted and they're going to have to wear that mark. But really, do we think it's fair that we would send this person to another country because of this? And to me, that type of suicidal empathy leads to the destruction of our society.
If you would like to support The John Justice Show, become an advertiser. Competitive rates for both personal endorsements and standard ads are available. For more details, email john.justice@americanexperiment.org.
That's right. Do what she says. Drop me an email. I'd appreciate it. Speaking of our fabulous sponsors, I want to take a moment and give a shout out to Mini Leaf. People have reservations, and I understand about the industry, but Mini Leaf is here for you to live a better life through their products. And I completely agree with that. And as a matter of fact, I am living a better life through the products of Mini Leaf. I've always had difficulty getting a good night's sleep. My wife, Melinda, will tell you I keep odd hours, and the circadian rhythm that everybody else deals with does not exist in my dojo because of the hours that I keep. Thankfully, with the Mini Leaf night gummies, I get a good night's sleep. I take one before I go to bed. I drift quickly off to sleep. Even if I get up in the middle of the night, once I get back into bed, I'm out like a light. And I'm waking up feeling refreshed, ready to drive in, to traverse the roadways, even when things are nutty out there. I got sharp mind. That's right. I'm well rested to be able to come here Monday through Friday and talk to you. Head on over to their website, MINNELEAF.com, and check out all of their amazing products. Not just the night gummies, but the spooky Mini Leaf tonics that are brewed right here in Eden Prairie. The fun gummies and all the packaging is local when it comes to Mini Leaf. And they use a company out of Brooklyn Park. So it's all the products are packaged locally. And the Triple Diamond Pain Cream, they're available at the website as well. So head on over to MINNELEAF.com. Again, that's minileaf.com, and taste happy at Mini Leaf.
John, the people going into assisted living nursing homes is disgusting. I have a 98-year-old woman who can't even tell you what street she lives on or her age, anything. She couldn't tell you anything. She could. But she had an election official come and help her vote. How sad.
Yeah. No, we hear that. We hear that a lot. It's part of the problem with this issue. When we talk with Ryan Wilson, we'll get his thoughts on this as well. We got a lot of stuff we'll be talking about with Ryan. He's actually in the studio already. He's watching the show from the comfort of the sofa. We may have to do that at some point. We talked about that in one of our comms meetings about providing the opportunities for people to come and sit back on the comfy chairs and sofas on days when we don't have any guests to come and watch the show live.
Good morning, John. Well, so right, the process that is in place to protect us from fraudulent voting includes someone just vouching for someone else and taking an oath that they're telling the truth. But no one goes to check whether they're telling the truth. And by the time they check, the vote has been counted and it can't be rescinded. Am I understanding that right? That's just ridiculous.
Thank you for the blast there, Heather. Greatly appreciated here on the John Justice Show, presented by American Experiment.
Seems to me that going in just saying you're somebody without actually voting wouldn't be impersonating them, because the law is to prevent fraudulent voting, which they never enforce against their own. But I would think there's also a big counter on a free speech. That's a First Amendment issue right there, because he never did. If he walked outside that door and just said, "Hey, I'm so-and-so," well, then nothing would happen. Should be no difference. And for that matter, Democrats are always saying that they represent the voters. Well, they don't represent me, so quit saying you represent me. So we prosecute them for impersonating voters.
That's one of the things that always drives me nuts of Governor Tim Walz and others when they talk about one Minnesota, or Thief Ellison. I'm representing all of Minnesotans. No, you're not, dude. You're representing your own interests. We'll talk about Thief Ellison later in the show. He's fighting to extradite one of the ICE agents that has allegations of use of force allegations during Operation Metro Surge. He's been urging Governor Greg Abbott out of Texas to extradite him back to Minnesota. That's just because he wants to campaign off it, and the whole extradition thing is just because they're campaigning off of it. I have comments from Greg Abbott that I'll share with you in the 8 o'clock hour here on the show. Let's get back to one more comment on this issue.
John, the healthcare official can officially go into the nursing home, and all those dementia patients, they're going to witness the voting by mail. That's what they're doing, is they're going after the people that are incompetent to vote.
Thank you all for the comments. Again, 612-584-4565, 612-584-4565 if you want to leave a comment on the Blaster line this morning, or you can email john.justice@americanexperiment.org. Before we talk with Ryan Wilson, let's just go here briefly. There's a couple of Minneapolis stories that I want to share with you. First off, Minneapolis is asking neighbors to watch for copper wire thieves after repeated streetlight thefts in several neighborhoods. The city said the thieves have hit streetlights in Minneapolis neighborhoods, including East Minnehaha Parkway, in 5 cases in recent weeks, and the damage is going to cost the city $50,000 to repair. Joe Lauren, Minneapolis Public Works, said this is what they're pulling out. He says crews are passing out flyers to residents along Parkway near Lake Harriet and Stevens Square, showing, and again, he's showing the copper wiring that they're stealing. He said the flyers show people what to watch for, including missing panels, exposed wires. Sometimes they march down the street and continue from block to block. It's a predictable pattern they can't get ahead of. Lauren said the thefts often happen over 2 nights, and said the thieves first expose the wires and then often return another night to cut them. Often we can't. Well, if they're set, I guess that's the whole point of setting the flyers out there, to make everybody aware of what's going on, right? Often we can catch them in the middle of the process. Law enforcement can intercept them before they come back for a second time. Last year, the city repaired more than 26 miles of copper wire in order to restore electricity to more than 700 lights. The city said the streetlight maintenance happens during the day, about 7 a.m. to 3:30. Workers usually wear reflective vests, drive marked vehicles. Anyone else working on streetlights any other time would be considered suspicious. So much for the laws that were passed by the legislature regarding the resale of these precious metals to dealers. I thought that was supposed to take care of all this, right? So in the meantime, while Minneapolis continues to deal with real issues, this is what I wanted to share with you. What is the Minneapolis City Council focused on? They passed an ordinance requiring establishments that serve alcohol and have a dress code to post the dress code visibly. The ordinance aims to prevent discrimination based on race or gender identity, often referred to as velvet rope discrimination. The ordinance will be reviewed by the full council next week. I'll share some further details on this coming up on the show. I have some audio from the city council meeting, and I want to spend a little bit of time diving into just how utterly ridiculous this any focus on this at all. I mean, the bottom line is, for me, don't pigeonhole businesses to force them to prove these parameters. It should be one of these, we refuse the right to refuse service. That should be how the businesses handle all of this. And if they decide they want to post the rules, they can post the rules. But if they go and they make them post these rules on the businesses saying what their dress code is, it's going to be really limiting for their businesses if they want to go and keep somebody from coming in. And they should have a right to go and do that. So we'll talk about that later on next hour here on the John Justice Show. Again, 612-584-4565. That's the Blaster line if you want to leave us a comment. John.justice@americanexperiment.org. And with that, we welcome in to the studio Ryan Wilson, Lieutenant Governor candidate with the Lisa Damuth campaign. Good morning, Ryan. Thank you so much for coming in this morning. It's good to see you.
Good morning. It's good to be back.
So how are you feeling since we haven't had the chance to talk personally since last week's primary? Let's go back there just briefly. What was that night like for you personally, to be involved in this campaign, not knowing how it's going to shake out? I don't want to use the term underdog, but the polling obviously was way off the mark over what the expectations were and what ended up occurring. So talk a little bit about your experience that night.
Yeah, you never know until the voters cast their vote, right? And until they count the votes and you see where you're at. And so the polls had us down I think 10 at one point and then 6 at another point. And I think it ended up being about, a 14-point swing from where the polls had us to where we finished up. So pretty huge polling error. And, we've seen that throughout the years, right? These polls have been drifted more and more off over time. And so, but it was a great night. It was a historic night. We've done something that, on the Republican side, I don't think has it been done ever. Arnie Carlson, he didn't receive the endorsement of the party, but ended up winning. But he was an incumbent governor at that time. I don't know if a non-incumbent governor has ever done what we did. And so, definitely underdogs. But we had a plan. We executed that plan from the get-go. And just like we have a plan for the general election here to take it to Amy Klobuchar and to make the case for why we need change here in Minnesota or why the status quo isn't working, we're going to execute that plan. And here's the thing. We know we got the right policies on our side. We've always known that. It's a matter of getting that message out to the public, and the public, it's an easy choice once you hear the differences between these two candidates.
I know there was a press conference yesterday. We'll talk a bit about that press conference, some of which was dovetailing off of some articles written by the policy fellows here at American Experiment and available at americanexperiment.org. This is a kind of a weird way to word this, but is it... Obviously, running a campaign is difficult, regardless of whether or not you're in a primary or a general. Is it easier in the general as opposed to the primary, where there's a much starker contrast, obviously, between you and now the candidate, as opposed to running against fellow Republicans? And how was the mindset shifted from the primary campaign to the general election?
When we got in this campaign in November, we were focused on. It was Governor Walz at the time, but we knew it. We knew that it could not be him in the future, right? And maybe it'd be Amy, or some people thought Angie Craig at the time, right, or other people. And we built a campaign from the get-go to really prosecute the case about fraud and why this election needs to be about bringing Minnesota back to the things it was known for that were great, that good governance state, right? That good life, as Wendell Anderson on the cover of Times magazine, extolled. And so that was always been the basis of our campaign. When Amy Klobuchar came in, we were the first, I think, only campaign to come out really differentiating hard between us and her. Had an ad, ready to go right away that was launched, showing Amy as a 20-year career politician and really a do-nothing politician for the state, and especially silent on fraud, while she, again, extolled the benefits of Tim Walz, and she said how incredible he is, and endorsed him and supported him. And so we've really been focused on Amy Klobuchar and the Democrats the whole time. And I think that's part of why we succeeded in the primary, is voters saw that we were built to be able to, really take it to that Democrat machine and make the case. And having a great candidate obviously helps. I mean, Lisa Demuth, and her accomplishments, and really being out front since 2019, right when she got in the legislature, talking about fraud, pushing fraud, and we can circle back to that as we talk about our fraud plan. But
yep.
So our campaign wasn't as much about going after the other Republicans, and they had some good ideas, and they weren't bad people. But obviously we fought to be able to go up against Amy Klobuchar because we believe and we know that we can beat her.
It's been fun for me in the length of time that I've been doing the show here in Minnesota to get to know the various individuals, yourself included, Ryan, because we go back to when you first ran for the other seat, and talk a little bit about running in this campaign versus when you first started entering into politics. I don't even know how many years it's been now, but I've had the opportunity to interview you several times, going back to when you ran before, and I'm interested to hear a little bit of your journey from then until now. Did you ever imagine that you would be on a ticket like this, and poised to actually be a part of a governor's office when you first decided to run for office a number of years ago?
Oh, I've just kind of been blessed. I just kind of take what, each day brings to me the next. There's no like master plan. I know here's what I'm going to be doing, this year and this week. It's just,
not running for the presidency in 2028 with Pete Hegseth.
Absolutely not. And it's kind of whatever the next best thing I can do to help Minnesota is. I'm a dad with 5 kids, right? I want this state to succeed. I want it to do well. I'm a baseball coach, right? I was a little league coach. I've coached hockey in the past. I'm somebody that has appreciated and enjoyed all the aspects of Minnesota. I was a small business owner. I started a small business, grew that business, was blessed with, being able to see that business succeed even through some hard times during the financial crisis in 2008. And so I want that for all Minnesotans. And so at every step of the way, it's like, how could I give back? And there's some things that I did in the court, right, as an attorney, to be able to, push to get kids back in sports when they were locked out of sports, being able to defend things like our elections, and successfully at the Minnesota Supreme Court a couple of times, right? And so none of these were, kind of planned out as some kind of a grand scheme in politics. Just what can I do today to help people? And so when I saw in 22 that the auditor's race, wasn't, I don't think we had any candidates in it in January. It's like, well, let's give this a go. My old business did some auditing, and felt like I had a good set of skills that could do that, and again, really make the case for why we should care about our tax dollars in Minnesota. So back then, I traveled around the state, talking about this thing called feeding our future. People looked at me cross-eyed. What is feeding our future? And at that point, I think the total fraud was $250 million. And so you ask what's different between this campaign and that campaign? Well, no, what's what's 250 million versus 9 billion? And the fraud continued to explode, and so the issues have gotten much more, much bigger. And that's part of why this fraud plan that we rolled out, the stakes are that much graver for the people that depend on a lot of these programs. And they're really not being served by the Democrats right now.
One more personal question, and we'll dive into some of the issues. I do want to get, we have some comments that have rolled into the blaster line at 612-584-4565. We'll get to those here in just a moment. Also, I haven't mentioned, we can talk about this briefly. Tim Walz yesterday moving to ban copper mining. I've got a big question on this, by the way, and I don't know if you have an answer or not. I'm going to throw it out there because this seems like a really odd move. But one more personal question for you. How much do you think your previous running for office helped prepare you for this role?
I think I came pretty close, right? I came within 8,000 votes. Yeah. That's 0.3%.
Does that sting, by the way? Like when you, at the end of the day, when you look at that, I mean, I just, for me, like, I'll never run for office. I don't have the wherewithal to do it. I'm fine doing what I'm doing. But when you say something like that, I go, I would be sitting back going, what could I have done? Is that hard to deal with? Or are you able to move on pretty quickly?
Well, what it does is it gives me bulletin board material. So 8,000 votes. We have 4,000 precincts in Minnesota. That's 2 voters per precinct. And so there's a lot of what could you have done to get that across? And it's not for me, it's not, I got lots of stuff I could do day to day. And I did a lot of great stuff in those last 4 years, able to help the states in a lot of ways. Would have loved to have been auditor because we could have stopped some of this fraud that was happening. But now it's given me the opportunity to be here with, one of the best generational candidates, Speaker of the House, Lisa Demuth, to be able to not just help in an auditor role, but to be able to take it to the next level by really transforming Minnesota government, bringing it back to the great things that we know. And so everything for a reason. And, but what it tells me is we're not going to leave those 2 votes on the table this time. And so we're going to make sure that everybody that votes in presidential years, but maybe doesn't vote in a midterm year, we're going to get them out to vote. We're going to make sure that they know the stakes of this election.
And that's probably one of the best data points that I've heard on the show for a long, long time in terms of providing perspective for anybody out there, not just for candidates, but for those that are looking to get involved and to help out when it comes to door knocking or going to your precinct district to make phone calls. When you consider, as you mentioned, 2 votes per precinct in races, and we've seen races that have been a heck of a lot closer than 8,000 votes where Republicans could have pulled things out. That's a really, really good stat.
Let me add one thing to that.
Sure.
So that's, it's 2 votes. I lost by 8,000 votes, right? I mean, it's a small margin of error. There were 150 to 200,000 Republicans that stayed home that year.
Yeah.
They voted for the president in the year before, year after, didn't vote that year. Again, we don't really have to convince those people to vote for us. We just got to convince them to get out and vote. And so that's where that ground game you just talked about, that's where making those phone calls, volunteering with your local Republican Party, grabbing onto a campaign, you can make a difference in the state. The other thing it tells us is this is a 50-50 state. We see it in the legislature, right? The House is tied, led by the Speaker of the House, Lisa Demuth. My race came down to, 0.3% between the 2 candidates. We are a purple state right down the middle. I think we're a little to the right too. I think we're a little red too, but we are a down the middle state. And so a Republican can absolutely win in this state. Just got to have that great candidate, that great campaign, the great operations. We got it all. This is, we have everything that we need to win here. We just got to go out, push, and make the case.
Well, and that issue, by the way, of the voter turnout, I mean, I've seen it in, I've seen it in previous places where I've done the radio show. You just increase the voter turnout by 2 percentage points and Republicans could be swept into office. That's always the difficult process, though. That's always the problem. And, I'll couple this with the conversation we were having before about the ridiculous rules that we have that open ourselves up to voter fraud, whether it's the lack of providing an ID, whether it is vouching for 8 people or unlimited in a healthcare facility. When you start to include those things, it really bolsters the argument when it comes to stripping away those things. But in order to do that, you need to elect leadership that sees the value in voter integrity and not making it so easy for anybody to go and vote. So with that, let's go ahead and get to a few things. I want to share with you a few points from John Phelan's got a piece out today at AmericanExperiment.org about Governor Walz. And we have a comment for you, Ryan Wilson, Lieutenant Governor candidate, who joins us here in studio on the John Justice Show presented by American Experiment. So John Phelan writes, one of the American left's main causes is ridding the country's economy of carbon. This will require vast amounts of copper. As Sprout, a global asset manager specializing in precious metals and critical energy transition materials, notes, and I'll just share with you a few points. By 2050, it's projected the global electric grid will need to double its capacity just to meet the 86% increase in electricity demand. It goes through a number of different upgrades, but it lands on these upgrades necessitate a substantial amount of copper, estimated at 427 million metric tons by 2050. When you look at EVs and the left's push for electric vehicles, EVs require 53 kilograms of copper in electric motors, batteries, inverters, wiring, charging, about 2.4 times more than conventional combustion engines. Demand is still projected to hit 2.8 million metric tons by 2030. I'm getting to a point here. He goes on to talk about the importance of what it is the left is pushing for, and yet they go and they make these really bizarre moves. Given the imperative for copper, especially among the agenda items for the left, it might come as a surprise to discover that yesterday, a suspiciously king-like exercise of his executive authority, Governor Walz banned copper mining in northern Minnesota. Now, there's a few stipulations on that. It's only good for 90 days after he leaves office, and we can talk about that. Let me share this comment for you, Ryan Wilson, and we can talk a little bit about this issue before we turn our attention over to fraud.
Good morning, John and Ryan Wilson over there on the couch. So why doesn't our governor just write an executive order out to block these guys from copper mining in Minneapolis so they can't steal the copper from the streetlights? Maybe Ellison can sue them. I don't know. I guess a lot to be done. Have a great day, bye.
Why do you have any thought on why Governor Walz did this? It does not make any sense to me. He's leaving office, right? So immediately my mind goes to, is there an outside influence here that's encouraging him to do this? But he's also leaving this controversial move that has a lot of miners upset, by the way. It's in the stories here attached to this. He leaves this potential move up to whoever becomes the next governor, which, has its own sort of circumstances surrounding it. But what was your instinctive reaction to Walz banning copper mining here in the state?
I mean, if the DFL does anything, it's coordinated, right? And so he's doing this for the benefit of Amy Klobuchar. Amy Klobuchar has stood by him since, he got in the race to run again. And they are one and the same, his policies and her policies. Lisa made clear where she stood on this yesterday in her statement. She trusts our miners to do it safely. She trusts the science. We're going to follow the science in our administration. Look, over in Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer's Michigan, they can safely mine, next to Lake Superior. Surely I trust our miners to do it right here. And it just shows the utter disregard that Amy Klobuchar and the DFL has for our miners, to not trust them to do the work. Again, other states can do this. We can't do this. I mean, that shows a real disrespect for that. And this gets back to a theme of the Democrats. And again, I'll go back to Amy Klobuchar, because I think it all rests with her. She is the leader of their party right now. She went down to Farm Fest and she says, I stand with farmers. Then she flies back to D.C. the next day, votes against them. She goes up to the Iron Range, says, I stand with miners, goes to D.C., votes against them. Minnesotans are tired of this duplicitous politicians that say one thing and do another. And so you asked me why he's doing this. I can't explain half the stuff that the DFL does. None of it makes sense to Minnesotans, right? Why do we still have fraud? Why did $9 billion go out the door and still no safeguards in place? I can't explain that. All I can tell you is the status quo isn't working for Minnesota, and people want politicians that don't just make empty promises in an election year. And that gets back to our fraud plan and contrasting with Amy's, right? Amy's big fraud plan is she's going to audit the government, top to bottom audit. I think that's her talking point. And she said that so she could run it in an ad, and so it sounds good. I'm sure she poll tested it. Well, you know who else did an audit of the government? Tim Walz did, right? He had the United Health Group do it a couple months ago and released that fully redacted report, and we don't know all the contents of it. And so we don't need another Tim Walz audit by Amy Klobuchar. We need fundamental change if we're going to do things like start to turn this state around.
I want to get into some of what was laid out yesterday in the press conference as we continue our conversation with Lieutenant Governor candidate on the Lisa Dames campaign, Ryan Wilson. It seemed this move by just one more thing on this move by Walz to ban the mining. It would seem to be that he may have even provided your campaign a gift if you're opposing to this. I mean, you could end up going and running off this unless they're looking at some data points that says that it's more favorable for them to Democrats to go and ban this mining. But as I mentioned, there's a lot of miners that are speaking out upset about this. So again, it just seems like a really bizarre move by Governor Walz.
Yeah, I mean, look, again, a lot of things are bizarre moves by Governor Walz, by the Democrats. I can't speak for why he did it. I wouldn't have done it. And obviously, we don't support what he did. I think the Center for American Experiment put out a video yesterday showing Governor Walz saying he couldn't do this exact thing, that this would have to be done by the legislature and not by executive order. He said that in 22 when he was running for office. So this just gets back to politicians that say one thing, do another, whether it be Tim Walz or Amy Klobuchar. People are just tired of people being misled. I'll be charitable with my words. Misled during campaign years.
Yesterday during the press conference, dovetailing off of the article available at AmericanExperiment.org. And I would encourage everybody to head on over to the website and definitely take a good look at the Wrong Track Minnesota piece that's available there that just goes through. And we talked about this with Ryan prior to the election. The major issues that Minnesotans are facing, and they're all backed up by facts. This too, 1,000 Klobuchar press releases, and none of them were on fraud. This stood in stark contrast to comments that she made not only at Farm Fest, but now out on the campaign trail. And I know yesterday, were you tasked with printing up the 1,000 pages there, or who was responsible for that? And if you want to give, if they're only printed on one side, feel free to bring them over. I could always use extra printing papers. So, did you have to go and print those up?
I did not. A former friend of the show who used to be on the show with you that works at comms on our team was his idea, and so. No, I did not.
It was a great visual.
Yes. And those weren't fake pieces of paper. Those are real. Those are every one of those press. You can thumb through them yourselves, and you can see that not one of them mentions this welfare fraud that we've been inundated with in this state.
So let's talk about. So during the legislative session, the Office of Inspector General was passed. There were other anti-fraud measures. So with the plan that you put forward yesterday, how would you go about utilizing the Office of Inspector General to go and combat fraud? Talk a little bit about what was laid out, and Lisa Damuth, and of course Ryan Wilson, your plan to go and combat fraud were you to be elected.
Yeah, so we got into November 2025, right? And I think one of our first big plans we rolled out was early December was our fraud plan. In that fraud plan, we had 5 different points in it. And I think the press conference yesterday was talking about how we've already delivered on 2 of those points. So one of them was back in December, Lisa said, this is going to be a priority. If it doesn't get done in session, I'm going to do it as governor to make sure that I work with the legislature to get it done. Because at that time, Walz was adamant, and they were lobbying against an Office of Inspector General. It's so weird that people that say they want to fight fraud, but then fight the things to help them fight the fraud.
Right.
I mean, how does that work? And so the independent Office of Inspector General, that got done. Lisa delivered on that. It was a priority for her as speaker, and now we have one. And so that was part of the update yesterday is, we've done that. And also modernizing our systems. One of the things we rolled out in our December plan was that we want to make sure that counties have the infrastructure and the tools that they need. Think that they have these old green screen computers, the flashing cursors, right? I mean, that's what they're on. And so they need to be brought up to speed so they can cross-check, make sure people are eligible, and catching fraud really at its source, which is when people are coming onto these programs. Got that done. Did a generational investment into our counties to be able to get that new software. And so 2 of the 5 things, big things that we had talked about when we first got in this race are already done. A couple other things, we're going to stop making sure that providers, and this is back in the original plan, make sure that providers, if they're accused of credible fraud, you're done. You don't get to keep collecting money. And we see that time and again with Democrats as they just keep letting this go and they let it keep persisting, not under us. And so it was an update to show that we are serious about our plan, and we've already used the tools that we have, the positions that we have, Lisa as speaker, to be able to deliver on that. And we wanted to contrast that to Amy Klobuchar. She came out with a plan, really a weak sauce plan, not a lot to it. She, her big talking point is she wants to audit the government from top to bottom. Like I said, Walz has already audited the government. Where did that go? Fraud keeps going. And here's the real. And when Amy comes on your show, I'd like you to ask her this: why hasn't she asked Governor Walz to implement her plan now? Lisa's already implementing her plan. She's got a Democrat governor in her state. She's the leader of her party. Why doesn't she call on Governor Walz to implement parts of her plan today? And it's because they're not serious. And I think that's the biggest marker for Minnesotans, is they can see that the Democrats are not serious about stopping fraud.
It reminds me a little bit of what we were talking about earlier when it comes to our voting. We open up. The Democrats will look at it and say, we're making it as easy as possible for people to vote. And we have all these safeguards on the back end. But unfortunately, those safeguards on the back end, you just can't trust the government to go and make sure they do the follow through for individuals, say, being vouched for. And it's very similar to what Democrats have done when it comes to these service providers. Very few barriers of entry, very little oversight, with an expectation that, well, if fraud occurs, we're going to catch it. And we've clearly seen that they haven't caught it. Do you think is that an aspect of this? Do you think you've done enough on the front end to stop that, to stop it from happening in the first place before we get to that spot? Is that a part of the plan as well?
We need a lot more on the front end, but let's take a look at something. So there was an article, or there's a story yesterday by NPR or 2 days ago that broke. There is a Liberian government official. I think the story said he was in West Africa, right?
Yep.
That has collected over $36 million administering fraud programs here and being the executive director of group homes. That's not normal. Like, this doesn't happen in the 49 other states. And so, Minnesotans just see so many stories about fraud. I mean, that's what are we doing here? And, these are real programs that need to help real people. And it shows a real callousness by Democrats like Tim Walz and Amy Klobuchar that allow this to happen. The why, I'll leave that for Minnesotans to try to figure out. We can see the what, and we can see what's happening is tax dollars are being wasted. I mean, there's a federal freeze happening right now on important federal funds for welfare programs that are stopping people that need it in the disability community. I mean, they are pleading for someone in government to help them. And, there's just that recertification that needs to be done. And Tim Walz isn't executing on that. Amy Klobuchar isn't standing up for that. What we said yesterday in the press release is help is on the way. Lisa is going to get those federal dollars unfrozen so they can go to the people that need to be helped, and that they don't go to the people that don't need to be helped. And so the taxpayer dollars are important. People work really hard for their money, right? Everybody works really hard. It's time away from their family when you're working. And if that money is going to foreign countries, that's a problem. And but there are people on the other side that need these programs, and to let these programs be defrauded is to let kids go hungry, right?
Yeah.
To let single moms get evicted and have to live in their car. That's the stakes of what's happening here. And again, it shows a real callousness by Democrats to let that persist.
Does fraud continue to dominate the conversation when you talk to potential voters and they express their concerns? And what else is sort of at the top of that list, Ryan Wilson?
Everywhere we go. I mean, it's the first thing and it's the last thing. We were at walking around Game Fair, right? So you think the people that will be coming up to us will be talking about outdoor issues, right? Maybe hunting, fishing, clean water, this sort of thing. No. First thing that comes up is fraud. And then they tie it to things that, like affordability. That's a big thing we hear about is, why are my property taxes so high? Why am I paying so much for car tabs? And we said, well, let's talk about solutions. Here are some of the things that we've done, that Lisa's done in the legislature. Here's some things we're proposing, and just have a conversation with folks. And that goes back to fraud. And so maybe if we're not paying $9 billion in fraud, at least $9 billion in fraud, maybe we don't have to have such high property taxes. Maybe we don't have to have such high car tabs, right? And so we've got lots of money for Leering centers, but not a lot of money to help people, afford their houses. And so it all dovetails together. Talk about schools, right? Schools are coming up soon, and we regularly hear about how schools need more money. There's a real, and the Center for American Experiment has done a lot on talking about what have you gotten for return on the money that we've given schools. But we would be in a much better spot with our schools if we weren't having to put $9 billion out in fraud. Everything goes back to fraud, right? The state will just run that much better when the money goes to the things that it's supposed to go to, and that burden will be lifted off of. So right now, people go to work and they pay taxes, and they're thinking it's for roads, right? They're thinking it's for their schools. They're thinking it's for maybe a safety net to help people, right? It's not. It's going to fraudsters. It's going to other countries, which is why in another part of our program, there are two other things that we announced yesterday, or a couple other things we announced I think are really important. Lisa is going to stop transfers of money. If you're on welfare, you are not transferring money out of this country. Seems common sense.
Yeah.
Happens today. And she said, look, if you have enough extra money that you can transfer it out of this country, sending it back, to whether it be family, friend, whatever, another country, then maybe you don't need to be on welfare, right? And so banning it out of the gate, work with the legislature, get that legislation in place. The other thing is you got to have serious consequences. If you commit fraud, you're going to jail. Period, full stop, mandatory minimum sentences. We see a lot of people getting off of plea deals right now. You're going to jail. We're going to get the money back for people. And if we need new tools to do it, to be able to go seize their assets, work with the legislature, get those tools, get them right away. But we can't just let the money go. And a lifetime ban on receiving welfare. If you stole from the system, if you took money from a kid's mouth that was hungry, if you took money from a mom that needed that money to stay in her house and not get evicted, you are never getting welfare dollars here in Minnesota again. You can go to another state, sure, that state could do what they want with you. But here in Minnesota, you are not fooling us twice.
Ryan Wilson, two things before we let you go this morning. Today, there was a new KSTP Survey USA poll. The summary provided by the AI overlords says, the poll shows the Minnesota's Attorney General race is a toss-up. While the DFL has a slight early edge for governor and U.S. Senate, the poll reveals demographic splits in each race, with undecided voters potentially playing a significant role in the outcome. The governor's race, of course, pitting House Speaker Lisa Demuth against Amy Klobuchar. The Senate races, Tafoya and Peggy Flanagan. We talked a little bit about this at the start of our conversation. It's obviously impossible to not look at these polls, but based off the results of recent polls, are you putting much stock into this? What do you do with this information? Do you do anything with this information?
No, we don't. And, we obviously we have our own internal polling and things like that. And that really drives, kind of where we deploy resources, assets, things like that. And so that's the real decision-making process. This poll, I think this is the same pollster that had us down 10 points. We ended up winning by, 10 points. And so crazy swing like that. I think people have these polls that are good for a media hit. They're good for entertainment. They maybe sell some ads by the people that do them. But I don't think people have a lot of credence into them. I think here's the best example of that.
It's good for content for this show. I can talk about it briefly, right?
Look, in 2010, I think it was the weekend before the election, the Tom Emmer, Mark Dayton election. I think it had Tom Emmer down like 10 or 12 points in a couple of these polls. Obviously, that was the closest race in a long time. I think he was within 10,000 votes, right? 0.5% or something less like that. And so it was a massive polling error. And, the purpose of a lot of this is to kind of, and there's studies that show this, try to turn people off from voting, turn out excitement. Again, I would say through the month of September, middle of October, any poll that early, I would just toss aside and just really listen to the substance of what people are saying. Can you trust the Democrats or the Republicans, Lisa or Amy? Who is the one that you believe is going to make the change? The person that's already doing it, that's already done it, or the person that issued 1,000 press releases and never once mentioned fraud?
Let's close out our conversation with Lieutenant Governor candidate with Lisa Demuth, Ryan Wilson, and we'll go back to the blaster line with a question for you, Ryan.
Hey, John, can you just ask Ryan, how can somebody get a yard sign in their yard? This is Todd from Robbinsdale. Thank you.
The hardest hitting question you're going to get all morning, Ryan, is Todd from Robbinsdale. Where can they get a campaign sign?
You go to www.lisa4mn.com, scroll to the bottom, and it'll give you lots of things to check off there. Get your yard sign. You can sign up for door knocking, for calling, all kinds of stuff. Lisa4mn.com.
Thank you for coming in on such a short notice, Ryan. I really appreciate it. Continue good luck in your campaign, and I'm sure we'll be talking again real soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, buddy. All right, we're heading into the third hour of the show this morning, presented by American Experiment. And it is the John Justice Show, presented by American Experiment. Glad you're with us this morning. If you missed any portion of today's show so far, do not fret. You can listen to the podcast. It's available up where you can listen to the show live on the MixLR app. It's completely free. Also across all podcast platforms. Remember, you can watch at MN Think Tank, also on Facebook and YouTube on the Center of the American Experiment pages. Those videos are posted when the show's complete, and also up on Rumble as well. We're about 14 minutes away from talking with Liz Collin from Alpha News. Recent reporting over at Alpha News regarding Derek Chauvin seeking a dismissal of charges in a bombshell filing alleging unlawful and fraudulent conduct. I'm really looking forward to talking with Liz about this and diving into this particular story, especially when it comes to other attempts to what's the way I want to other attempts to assist Derek Chauvin in what many believe was a sham of a trial regarding the death of George Floyd, and whether or not this has any potential to actually change the situation that Derek Chauvin is in. So we'll talk to Liz Collin again coming up at 8:15. Got several comments that rolled in regarding Governor Tim Walz banning copper mining in Minnesota, crippling attempts to decarbonize the economy. There's a brand new piece available at AmericanExperiment.org, written by John Phelan, who was on for the last half hour of yesterday's show. Governor Tim Walz posted on X, "I'm using my executive authority to ban non-ferrous mining in the Boundary Waters. As far as my administration is concerned, the fight for the future of the Boundary Waters is over. The verdict is in. The decision is made, and we'll protect this place, at least for 90 days after I leave office." It's a pretty definitive statement for a move that limits mining near the BWCAW, but won't last forever because under Minnesota law, the executive orders from the governor expire 90 days after that person has left office. So who is Walz appealing to in doing this? I don't think this was out of his own belief or the goodness of his heart. He's got nothing to lose. In my opinion, there was external motivation here. Ryan Wilson mentioned Amy Klobuchar. I actually wrote that in my notes, right? Is this helping Amy so that if she were to win the governorship, she doesn't have to go and do this? Will she extend it? I mean, that's what she needs to be asked. John Phelan says, "No doubt the No Kings crowd are dusting off their placards as I type. It illustrates the complete incoherence of the American left. We need to decarbonize our economy, they say, but we will be damned if we'll let you mine the copper required to do so, even on their own terms. One can perhaps have a decarbonized economy or one with no copper mining. One cannot have both. The American left faces a time for choosing." And we've seen this in other circumstances recently. There was a lawsuit that was put forward by one organization recently, and you had prominent Democrats going and touting that particular organization that the state was currently suing. Make it make sense. No, there was some externality forcing the move by Governor Tim Walz. Let's go to your thoughts on the blaster line.
Good morning, John. Good show so far. Walz is blocking copper because he's helping his friends over in China.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Listen, at this point, I'll take whatever suggestions that you have. Because there was obviously, let me back up. In my opinion, there were externalities driving this move by Governor Tim Walz.
Hey, John. I thought Minnesotans didn't want any teams, but yet Tim Walz can unilaterally ban something from happening. I think it makes sense, John.
Make it make sense is a constant theme when it comes to the left here in Minnesota and really across the country as well.
Hey, John. Walz banning copper mining doesn't surprise me. He was up there a couple weeks ago. We all saw that stupid golf video of his. But I think the average Minneapolitan, St. Paul resident, has no idea what mining is. So they hear Boundary Waters and mining, of course they support it. Have a great day.
Yeah, I wouldn't be so sure about that. I would not be so sure about that. We'll have to see how this plays out. As I mentioned, there's a lot of a lot of the mining companies, obviously, and individuals on both sides of the aisle that are none too happy about this move by Governor Tim Walz. So I didn't realize that those stupid golfing videos, he was actually up north when he was doing that. So I don't know. Maybe somebody helped him out with his golf game in exchange for going and banning the mining up in the Boundary Waters. Perhaps that's the case. We've had a changeover of producers. Isaac has now joined us in studio. It's like a magic trick. I'm over here doing the show. I look over and there's another dude who's over to my right. Good morning, Isaac.
Good morning.
How you doing this morning, sir?
Good.
Good to see you. Bright and early.
Bright and early.
getting a little preview of Freedom Friday. We should have a full house on Friday. We were talking with Ryan Wilson a moment ago. Thank you for everybody who left comments for Ryan and the press conference that they had yesterday. 1,000 Klobuchar press releases. None of them were about fraud. This was a focus of the press conference as Lisa Damuth went and laid out her plans to go and tackle fraud. I wanted to make one quick point on this, and I want to share with you something else regarding fraud here in Minnesota. But this is significant. You know, when the fraud started to occur, Feeding Our Future, going back to 2022, you had half a dozen or more prominent politicians, left and right, DC and Minnesota, that made declarations calling out this fraud. And yet, Lamy Klobuchar remained completely silent on the issue. So it's not like a political stunt to go and point out why she doesn't care about the fraud. If she did, she would have gone and said something about it earlier. Or as, you know, Ryan Wilson said a moment ago, when it comes to the audit of the state, why not go and encourage Governor Dim Walz to go and do that now?
Hi, good morning, John. You know, mining copper here is bad, but the left is perfectly okay with slave labor mining it in the Congo.
Yeah, they just ignore that. They just ignore the slave labor that is used in other countries when it comes to the precious metals that they need to go and power the EVs that they tout so often. Matt Dean has a piece this morning. Minnesota's Medicaid program has seen explosive growth in back in 2019. Okay, spending nearly doubled to a projected $24 billion in fiscal 2026. The growth is attributed to increased enrollment, higher average payments, and persistent cost increases exacerbated by documented fraud vulnerabilities. Despite the predictions of decreased enrollment, spending and enrollment have continued to rise, highlighting the needs for reform to address fraud and prioritize legitimate care, which is obviously why the Damuth gubernatorial campaign held a press conference yesterday and was focused on this. So state spending on Medicaid has nearly doubled since 2019. 250,000 Minnesota enrollees are predicted to be removed from Medicaid as a result of Trump's big, beautiful bill. It did not happen in 2026. In fact, spending and enrollment grew. So when you hear those claims by the left counter to that fact, they're lying or they're completely misinformed. Per capita spending on Medicaid in Minnesota is now over $20,000 per person, and the costs continue to explode. One more item of note that I want to share with you, keeping with the fraud issue. We've talked about the Minnesota Promise Grant, the individuals who have been approved that shouldn't have been approved for this Promise Grant, again, taxpayer dollars. KSTP Channel 5 has uncovered now multiple incomplete applications that were approved for this grant. Here's a bit of the reporting from Channel 5.
Here we go again. Another approved application for a Minnesota Promise Grant that failed to answer the key questions in the application. The two questions were, how will this money help the success of your business? You see it right there. And how will they help achieve your goals? It's blank, and it got approved. By the way, I'm Ryan with 5 Investigates. I've been covering this $100 million Minnesota Promise Act program, taxpayer-funded program, for about a year, and I keep finding more problems. This is now the second application I have found through the Neighborhood Development Center that has approved an incomplete application for taxpayer money. This business is a trucking business. It received just shy of a $20,000 Promise Grant. And in case you're wondering, does it really matter if someone answers these questions or not on the application? According to critics, yes, it does. And they point to this as a reason. On the application, it says these questions will show how the grant would help the business and confirm, keyword, confirm that you will use the funding in the matter the legislation dictates. We are not done reporting on this program yet, in part because the state has only handed over about 5 applications of the more than 1,000 we have asked for. It's been more than 6 months, and we're still waiting. Follow for more updates and reach out if you know something I should know.
And again, that's from KSTP Channel 5. Why do we have these problems? There's a commonality between them all. And it goes back to Democrats and their priorities are screwed up. Bottom line. If it doesn't help them politically, if it doesn't help them grow power, retain the power, right, then they don't care about it. And we see example after example of that being the case. And two examples that I have here as well that we'll get into coming up on the show. I mentioned this last hour. You have all the crime that's taking place, more copper wire thefts, just as the most recent story this morning in Minneapolis. And what are they focused on in Minneapolis? The city council is focused on not only decriminalizing bathhouses so that Isaac can open his bathhouse emporium.
Finally.
But they're also moving forward with ordinances that target velvet rope discrimination at bars and restaurants. What is Attorney General Keith Ellison focused on? He's focused on suing the Texas governor to force extradition of an ICE agent. Their priorities are all focused on what is most politically expedient for them and not for the very people who, one, put them into power, including their own constituents, who they've brainwashed to the point that they've been convinced that these are the things they should be focused on, but certainly everybody else that didn't go and support them. They're supposed to be in these positions for everybody in Minneapolis, but they're not. Keith Ellison is supposed to be the people's lawyer, but he's not. And this is what I think we all hope begins to change coming up in the upcoming election. John.justice at AmericanExperiment.org. John.justice at AmericanExperiment.org. If you want to leave us a comment, you can do so. 612-584-4565. 612-584-4565. Before we talk with Liz Collin from Alpha News, I see her waiting in the wings. Guys and girls, gals, I don't know what's most politically correct. Men and women.
Humans. People.
Humans. People of a particular size. Your old self will be disappointed in you. You used to own the room. You don't anymore. It's harder to do daily tasks. And I've been talking about this a lot because I'm not kidding. This 100% happened. We were walking into Target over the weekend, and I told Melinda, I said, man, getting around and just doing things is so much easier now that I've lost the weight. Going on 27 pounds that I've lost through the NutraWave program. I'm on my second round right now because I believe in this program because it works. And I actually have gone through the cycle. I was on the program. I came off the program, did it while I was on vacation, lost 22 pounds. Went back to my normal diet, but my relationship with food changed just through the process of the program. It's not even like a part of the program. The program turns on the fat burning so that you can lose the weight. You start now within the next couple of weeks, and by the time the holidays arrive, you're going to be a brand new you for your friends, your family, and for yourself. It's one of the best ways that you can stay healthy. No pills and no shots. 13 years, 31,000 people in the metro. They've lost the weight, and you can too. It all starts with a free Truth Metabolic Scan plus a free red light therapy session. You have nothing to lose, but spots are limited, so call today. 952-260-1965. That's 952-260-1965. Mention the keyword strike when you call. You can call and talk to Dr. Bob for a NutraWave and mention that keyword strike. And you can get, potentially, because spots are limited, that free Truth Metabolic Scan and the red light therapy session. Again, 952-260-1965. No pills, no shots at NutraWave. NutriWave.us. Individual results may vary. So go and check out the program. And trust me, it's the best weight loss program I've ever been on. And I feel better and better every single day. And I feel good about the next portion of the show because I know I'm in good hands. I'm very pleased to welcome Liz Collin from Alpha News. First appearance on the new show here at American Experiment. Good to see you, Liz, and thank you so much for coming on this morning.
Great to see you. Congratulations on the new show. We've been watching over here at Alpha News. Exciting to see and to hear as well. This video thing's not so fun, is it? How much makeup are you wearing, John?
I'm not wearing any makeup. This is all natural
beauty. Yeah,
that's right. That's right. Well, you know what, Liz? If I were going to wear any makeup, I'd have to do my own makeup. I don't think anybody wants
a good idea.
To see that.
Yeah, I can teach you a few things.
I could have Isaac do it. I don't know. Isaac, you good at applying makeup? Come on. Okay. That's what I thought. Liz, we've talked about previous efforts when it comes to change the situation for Derek Chauvin in his conviction in the death of George Floyd. And I know that there's been a lot of questions swirling around those efforts of whether or not they are actually beneficial to Derek Chauvin. This new bombshell court filing of Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin and his attorney seeking the dismissal of the charges. Am I correct in saying this carries a much different weight and bearing than what we've seen in previous efforts to change the circumstances that Derek Chauvin has been under serving his time in jail?
Yeah, John, I think absolutely. So these are allegations of fraud, essentially pointed squarely at Governor Tim Walz and Attorney General Keith Ellison in this case. I know that right there is going to shock you right at this point. But this really is a bombshell petition. It is the third filed by Greg Joseph, filed yesterday at Hennepin County Court. Joseph has been representing Derek Chauvin now for the last couple of years, but he's calling the charges against Chauvin illegal, the trial a fraud, and he's asking that the charges be dismissed. But I just want to back up for your listeners a little bit to lay it out. I know those days, I think, are a blur for many people since Minneapolis was essentially burning. But if you remember, so May 25th, 2020, shortly thereafter, we have a veteran Hennepin County prosecutor. Her name is Amy Sweezy. She did not want to charge the other officers, and she thought additional charges against Derek Chauvin went too far. So this is all from court documents related to a lawsuit that she filed against county attorney back then, Mike Freeman at the time, accusing him of retaliation for withdrawing from the Chauvin case. So essentially you have Hennepin County prosecutors, they're not comfortable with the charges, and Mike Freeman at the time, he's not happy about that. Again, all from this case in court documents, that is very clear. So what happens next? You have Governor Walz come in. He appoints Attorney General Keith Ellison to the case. What happens next? Derek Chauvin is then charged with second-degree murder, the most serious charge. And in this 31-page petition, Greg Joseph argues even the reassignment of the case to Ellison was unlawful because the Hennepin County District Court did not convene a grand jury, and that clearly violates state and federal rules and laws. So you have Chauvin's attorney talking about this in an interview that I did with him just yesterday, essentially how he had to go back to the very beginning of this case. He finds these fundamental and basic violations of due process. He says he's absolutely shocked and he has to do something with that discovery. And that's where this petition came from. And he filed it in a pretty short amount of time.
Talking with Liz Collin from Alpha News, you kind of answered my question, and I was discussing this yesterday when you guys broke this story, and the first thing that came to mind, and the first thing that I was asked regarding this was, well, why did they just now find out about it? Had the attorney not gone back to and had not realized what had happened regarding the lack of the convening of this grand jury? Can you talk a little bit about the timeline and why this is happening now, so many years later?
Yeah, it's exactly as Greg Joseph lays out in the sense that he has been representing Derek Chauvin again for the last couple of years, and there have been some petitions filed before. You'll remember even he was being represented by another attorney at the time, went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, and that appeal was basically based on the change of venue. You know, how the heck can you get a fair trial in Hennepin County, right? With all of this, the U.S. Supreme Court decided not to take the case back then. But this really was something that came together very quickly. And I think everybody thinks that the law is followed, but maybe we know a little bit more now, right, about Keith Ellison and Tim Walz, let's be honest. And I don't think that Greg Joseph was aware, and I'll be honest, Derek Chauvin, not aware either, who's looking at the law sort of line by line. But what's interesting is you look at the law, this is directly from state statute. Basically, the grand jury shall inquire into the willful and corrupt misconduct in office of all public officers in the county. Derek Chauvin, a public officer, so you have to take this thing to a grand jury. In fact, what's interesting here, John, this exact argument was used in Ryan Lonergan's case. That's the Minnesota State Trooper charged with the murder or the death of Ricky Cobb. The charges were dropped. His attorney at the time, Chris Mattel, argued this exact same thing. And again, we know what happened in that case. So again, in theory, a grand jury, you know what they would have been able to see in this case? The MRT, the maximal restraint technique, the body camera footage, the autopsy, the toxicology results. Instead, everything that happened after that, Chauvin's attorney is alleging in this petition, is kind of the show trial that is put on. And everything that happened before, I'll just read one line from the petition. The political fruits of this unlawful prosecution have shaped the trajectory of this state and the world. So again, calling this an unlawful prosecution from the very start of Derek Chauvin.
Boy, Liz, it takes your documentary, The Fall of Minneapolis, and it kind of puts it in a whole other a whole other light in the wake of this of the move of Chauvin's attorney with what you just laid out. I mean, I know you guys labeled it as a bombshell, but I mean, if you were ever going to label anything as a bombshell, this would be it. Have you? I'm assuming not, but I'll ask. I mean, have we heard anything from Ellison or Walz regarding this? And I know no surprise to you, Liz, or maybe it is a surprise. I didn't see a whole lot of coverage apart from Alpha News on this particular story. I know it's shocking.
Yeah,
as I was doing my prep today, but have we heard from any of the individuals involved in this that were, tasked with charging Chauvin of these crimes?
Yeah, I will say that we went to work as soon as this was filed. I reached out to the office of Governor Walz. Let me just tell you how hard it is to get in touch with our governor. Also, not surprising. Emails bounce back, and then you also get an email that says they're not checking the media email often, which also makes you feel good, right? So no response from Governor Walz, no response from Keith Ellison. I think I'm basically on the blocked list from him. And also the Hennepin County Attorney's Office has not responded. But you're right. Also, I didn't see this story anywhere yesterday. Maybe today or next week, if somebody gets around to it, they will.
Liz Collin from Alpha News. Let's talk a little bit about what happens next. And I guess I'll just ask, what happens next? I mean, I'm assuming we're waiting to see court responses to all of this. And let's just do a hypothetical here. If these charges, the dismissal of these charges, were to bring about that very thing, I mean, then what happens? Is there, is that it for him? Is he released? Is there a retrial? What happens next, Liz?
Yeah, so basically, Greg Joseph explains this yesterday. It's a longer conversation with him. If you head over to Alpha News MN on our YouTube page, you can check it out there. But he talks about how essentially Hennepin County District Court Judge Paul Scoggin, he will have 45 days to respond to this petition. And then Mr. Joseph will go ahead and respond to that. He's saying that he'd like the charges dismissed. He'd also like to argue this case in front of the judge, so it could go a couple of different ways. But remember, Derek Chauvin also has, and this applies to the other officers as well. I will say that. Remember, the three officers, they all went to prison. Tu Tao just got out a few months ago, essentially after giving another year on his sentence because Judge Peter Cahill did not like the fact that he was reciting Bible verses during that court proceeding. But there is also a federal sentence involved in all of this. So the state is really the thing that they're going to have the toughest time sort of undoing here. But I don't know how you go forward with something like this. What does this also say to police officers in the state of Minnesota, right? If they're doing these backdoor dealings for years. And again, this isn't just Derek Chauvin's case. This is Kim Potter's case where a grand jury, and this is all laid out in the petition. Yeah. Brian Cummings, who's another Minneapolis police officer, he was charged after an incident that happened back in 2023. But this all happens in a pretty short amount of time in Minnesota. In Hennepin County, I will say, they try to pull it again with Londrigan. They're called out on it. And it pretty interesting how that case is then dismissed.
Liz, you and Alpha News have been at the forefront of these issues regarding Derek Chauvin, of course, the fall of Minneapolis. I'm curious, what was your own reaction when you heard from Derek Chauvin's attorney and his calls to dismiss it, and you were given the details? I'm just curious what your instinctive reaction was to it.
Yeah, my colleague, who I know you've had on before as well, Dr. J.C. Shea, who did the Fall of Minneapolis with us, and our other documentaries as well. I think we really felt differently after reading this. Like, wow. And I shouldn't say, trust me, we've thought all the arguments along the way have been very good in a society where common sense and things like the justice system seem to make sense. But this is Minnesota after all, and Hennepin County after all. But again, also the case against us. Remember, we were sued for the book and the documentary in Hennepin County, and that case is also wrapped up in this now as well. That case being dismissed against us, and then you have all of the court declarations accusing one of the star witnesses, right, Katie Blackwell, of perjury in the case. So I do think that we felt different, John, when we read this. Going, first of all, we're like, how did we miss this? But also, what an important argument, and something that really should, frankly, be getting a whole heck of a lot of attention.
Well, it seems to me this is going to be something that the media is going to have a very difficult time ignoring as it moves forward. Do we know anything about this Judge Scoggins at all in terms of his background? Have we gotten that far yet?
Well, what's interesting is Greg Joseph submitted a petition to him not that long ago in the past, and he basically did not side with the arguments that Greg Joseph was making about the case at the time. So that's something we reported on not that long ago. Also encourage your listeners, we do have the case, all of the updates on the fallofminneapolis.com to kind of the different twists and turns that these appeals have taken, and you can see the documentary there as well for free. But he did not seem to be going along with the arguments for that last petition. I think he has a pretty good reputation from what I gather, this judge. But it is going to take some moral courage, I think, here to do the right thing. But also, like I said, I just think these arguments are really strong, and the law is the law.
Yeah. Just the last couple of things, and then I'll cut you loose here, Liz. And thank you for the time this morning. I encourage everybody to head on over to alphanews.org. Check out this reporting and the interviews you mentioned as well. You touched upon it, but when it comes to the other officers involved in this, I mean, this has a direct impact on them as well, correct?
Oh, absolutely. And also something that they were not aware of either, with this filing going. Like, are you kidding me? Have
you talked to Tou Thao yet? Have you talked to Tou Thao about this yet?
You know, I was actually texting him about some other things, and said that this was going to be big, and I've yet to kind of get his response. So I think it will be interesting too. That's an interview that we did recently over at Alpha News as well. You'll find that on the fallofminneapolis.com. But so many wrongs in this case. But again, going back to the very beginning and putting it back together, and Greg Joseph just talking about this, just being absolutely stunned. And I will say that I've spoken to several attorneys about all of this too, saying this is a really good argument, and they're kind of like, wow, we missed this too.
Well, we'll certainly anticipate further updates in that 45-day window. I would imagine we'd get some sort of update between now and then. Not have to wait for the 45 days. I know it's just speculation territory, but I imagine we'll get some information before that, before the end of that time period. Wouldn't? Do you feel the same way?
No. This
Never
wheels
mind.
of justice are quite. It'll be 45 days for sure. But I will say that this could be the mob mentality still at work in Hennepin County, and this judge says no. However, again, they can take this to the Minnesota State Supreme Court. This could go all the way. This is a procedural issue, a structural issue. Somebody's gonna have to fix. It could go again all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court.
Yeah, that was going to be my last question for you, Liz, and thank you for that. Anything people should be checking out at alphanews.org? I've covered several of the stories this morning, but anything you want to tee up before we say goodbye this morning?
Yeah, which we very much appreciate. Thank you very much. Yes, if your listeners want to check out, we have a new story up about Amy Klobuchar that I think will be interesting. All these clips about her. And she actually responded to Alpha News for the very first time on a story.
It's like she's actually running for governor and wants to win.
Yeah. This Walz thing of not responding to us for essentially, I think it was the last 4 or 5 years at this point. She seems to be going a different route, but maybe it's because of what we were asking her about for the story. So new story there from Luke Sprinkle. You'll find on our homepage.
Liz Collin, fantastic to see you, and thank you so much for coming on the show this morning. I greatly appreciate it. I look forward to the next time you and I get a chance to chat. And again, I encourage everybody to head on over to alphanews.org. I go there at least twice a day, in the morning when I wake up and when I'm doing prep in the afternoon. And I encourage everybody else to do the same thing. Thank you, Liz. Great seeing you.
Great to see you, John. Thank you.
So in the midst of all of this, what has Keith Ellison been focused on? He's been focused on going and attempting to extradite the ICE officer who shot a man in North Minneapolis last January, and then has been accused of making false statements about the circumstances that led up to that shooting. Ellison and Hennepin County Attorney Scary Moriarty announced at a news conference Tuesday of the new lawsuit to bring about the extradition of the ICE officer Christian Castro. Ellison's campaigning on this. He only wants him extradited to bring him here so he can grandstand right? Make an example of this individual because they've made Operation Metro Surge a cornerstone of their campaigns heading into November. Now, at the time of the writing of this article from Fox 9, there had not been a response from Texas Governor Greg Abbott. He did respond yesterday, and here is what he had to say at a press conference in Texas regarding Ellison and Scary Moriarty wanting to extradite to the ICE officer Christian Castro.
Well, first of all, I don't trust Tim Walz on anything. Let alone something like this. But listen, while they're making demands, I got a demand of my own. And that is, it's time for Minnesota to step up and repay the United States of America and Americans for all the fraud that they've committed in their state under federal programs. And I will not respond to them at all until they step up and do what's right and they acknowledge their fault in the fraud that took place and they fully repay the United States of America for the fraud they committed.
It's the John Justice Show presented by American Experiment. Joining us next, jam-packed with guests this morning, here on the couch at the American Experiment studios, Eric Lippman. Utility Reform Now, an association of the Minnesota utility ratepayers, is calling on 5 commissioners of the Minnesota PUC not to charge Minnesota ratepayers for post-election day travel by commissioners to, of all places, the Caribbean. You know, often we hear about these after the fact. You hear about Governor Tim Walz traveling around the country, traveling overseas in the taxpayer dime. And I know that this is something that governors do, but you don't often have the opportunity to actually stop it before it happens. And this is what we'll be talking about with Eric Lippman. He is the Chief Advocacy Officer of Utility Reform Now, and he'll be joining us next here on the John Justice Show, presented by American Experiment.
Think about it. Now that school's out for the summer, how are Minnesota students doing? Not very well. Minnesota ACT scores fell again last year and are the lowest they've been in 10 years. In fact, fewer than half of Minnesota students can either read or do math at grade level. Think about it. We used to brag about our schools. Now we're losing to states like Mississippi. Visit AmericanExperiment.org for more information. Think About It is brought to you by Center of the American Experiment, Minnesota's think tank.
And now, here's commentary on the latest issues facing Minnesotans. From the hosts, policy fellows, and guests of American Experiment. For more content, head on over to the Center of the American Experiment's YouTube page or at americanexperiment.org.
There is certainly a culture at the City Council and at the Mayor's office, again, over the last 10 years, that has just not been willing to hire police officers. And we have seen rhetoric and action that has very much been about defunding the police. We filed a petition called a writ of mandamus, which is basically a Latin word for we command, where we're asking the court to hold the mayor to his duty and hire those police officers. And we have tried to detail in our court papers the real world effect this has on people, including our brave clients who've come forward and put their name on court papers and who've experienced everything from bullet holes in their houses to family members who've been struck by a vehicle and in a hit and run, never solved, to personal vandalism at their homes and property where they've had property stolen, to murder in their neighborhoods where they don't feel safe, they don't feel protected, they literally feel they cannot go out at night. Because we challenged it on behalf of the Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus, and we said this is a violation of the single subject and title clause of the Minnesota Constitution. We are challenging this one section on behalf of our clients, the binary trigger clause, which had to do with how you define a trigger that can, with one pull, fire off multiple shots.
And that's just mashed into this 1,400-page thing, right?
Yes, that covers everything from health, higher education, firearms, energy, agriculture, human services, health, and paid leave. Not a single subject. The court in August of 2025 struck down the bill and severed basically one provision relating to the binary triggers. Judge Castro had some interesting words for this, and he said, out of respect for precedent, favoring severance. I'm just going to strike down the binary trigger amendment. But then he says, quote, make no mistake, during the late hours of May 19, 2024, lawmaking did not occur within the framework of the Constitution. This court respectfully suggests that if there has ever been a bill without a common theme and where all bounds of reason and restraint seem to have been abandoned, this is it.
It's John Justice, and you know that feeling when your body is tired but your brain just won't shut off? That's where CBN comes in. It's a naturally occurring hemp cannabinoid known for its relaxing, sleepy effects. CBN helps tell your body that it's time to rest. The Mini Leaf Night and Night Plus Sleep Gummies combine CBN, CBD, and CBG to help you fall asleep faster, stay asleep longer, and wake up feeling refreshed. Free shipping is available this month at MINNELEAF.com. Taste happy at minileaf.com.
If you would like to support The John Justice Show, become an advertiser. For more details, email john.justice@americanexperiment.org.
Think about it. Minnesota has always been a low crime state. But according to the most recent Bureau of Criminal Apprehension data, we are now above the national average when it comes to Part 1 crimes, a category that includes crimes like murder, assault, rape, and carjackings. Think about it. Minnesota is now a high crime state. Visit highcrimemn.com to learn more. Think About It is brought to you by Center of the American Experiment, Minnesota's think tank.
It's a John Justice Show presented by American Experiment. Remember, if you want to leave a comment, you can do so on the Blaster line, 612-584-4565. You can also email me, john.justice@americanexperiment.org. I am very pleased to welcome to the sofa here at the American Experiment studios. We have the Chief Advocacy Officer at Utility Reform Now! Exclamation point. Eric Lippman. Good morning, Eric. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
No, thanks so much for having me, John. I appreciate the exclamation point and then a chance to spend time with your listeners and viewers.
So let's get our listeners and viewers, as you mentioned, familiar with you. Talk a little bit about your background and also what the utility reform movement or group is all about.
Sure. I appreciate the opportunity to do that. I'm what they call a 30-year man. I was 30 years in state government. Was Deputy Secretary of State for Mary Kiffmeyer, worked for Governor Pawlenty, was in the State House myself, and then most recently until December was a judge, an administrative law judge, with the state of Minnesota for 19 years. And so lawyer and advocate and public servant and judge. And I became radicalized over this past summer by what the Minnesota Public Utilities Commission is doing and not doing. And so decided to leave the bench because I needed to say things out loud that were inappropriate for a judge to say, but hopefully within the bounds for what an advocate could do.
I know we're going to talk about the Minnesota PUC, but with your background, holy cow, we need to bring you back in just so I can pick your brain over what's happened here in Minnesota for the past 30 years. And I guess, by the way, I can call myself a 30-year man. I've been doing radio for 30 years. So just real quick. Sure. You know, what are your thoughts about you've been involved here in Minnesota for so long? I mean, just what is sort of your instinctive reaction to my asking you of, you know, where Minnesota is right now compared to when you started, you know, working within the state of Minnesota?
Sure. So the temptation is great for the grumpy old man to be curmudgeonly and be a grumpy old man and say, well, back in my day, it was better. But I do think that we're on a cusp, and that's the reason why I'm here. To talk with your viewers and your listeners, John, particularly because I think we have an opportunity. I think there has been a culture shift, a lot more inattention over the 16 years of DFL leadership and administration in Minnesota, that there's been a cultural shift about spending priorities and the way to conduct a government that really were an anathema to 20 years ago, as recently as that, or as recently as the Wendy Anderson holding up the Time, the fish in the Time magazine cover. We're a long distance from that, but here's the good news for your listeners and your viewers. We can get back to that, and I have a prescription for just one phone call. If you are mad about feeding your future and the $8 billion that went out the door, and you find out that after the fact, well, I've got a case of an I think, an egregious abuse of ratepayer and taxpayer funds that can be stopped with a single phone call to either the governor or the Minnesota Public Utilities Commission. I'd be glad to tell you about that. But there has been a culture shift, and we're at a cusp, and we can change it.
I'll add one more point to that, and then we'll dive into your purpose for coming on the show this morning. And again, thank you so much, Eric Lippman, Chief Advocacy Officer at Utility Reform Now. And that is, I didn't get a chance to talk about this with Ryan Wilson when he was on with us last hour, but I've been encouraged by, having been here for 10 years, watching the shift myself just over that course of a period of time. There's been a wholesale shift, in my opinion, recently, because we've moved from the anger and the frustration and people leaving Minnesota, and now the conversation is shifting. People are still frustrated. They want to see change, but they're also identifying the reasons why we want to save the state. They're recommitting their efforts to and pointing out to, these are the things that make Minnesota great and why we need to do everything we can to preserve it. And from my perspective, Eric, that was non-existent up until about 6 to 8 months ago. It was just negativity. I'm getting out. I'm leaving. It could be a part of the fact that we're in an election cycle, but even past election cycles, I did not see this level of attention to pointing to the positive aspects of Minnesota and what we need to change to keep things that way and get things better once again. Are you seeing something? It sounds like you're seeing something similar.
Exactly similar to what you're describing. And indeed, the reason why I went from one side of the bench to the other side of the bench is because, in fact, Minnesota has a set of due process guarantees in our state government, a statute that I was working under for those 19 years, the Minnesota Administrative Procedures Act. I think it's poetry in the statute. It is a fabulous a set of guarantees akin to the Bill of Rights that preserve a style and a kind and an efficacy in government, in state government, really, that is not only a model to the other states in the union, but has given us the kind of state government, at least back in the day, that we could genuinely be proud of, and that would be, in the Wendy Anderson example, a leadership to the nation. In fact, Wendy Anderson was the governor that brought us the Minnesota Administrative Procedures Act 50 years ago. It's because of those values and the transparency and the efficacy that was built into a Lake Wobegon style of state government. We were better than average and justifiably proud of what we could do, but we're losing that. And I think the role for people like me who understand the complexity of the system is to break it down into simple components and to allow ordinary citizens to reclaim their government. That's the reason why I'm here.
One of the, and I can tell you firsthand that one of the biggest pet peeves of this show, and I think it's for most people paying attention, is obviously the misspending of taxpayer dollars, but coupled with that is when we have individuals involved in these government programs that end up taking these trips and going places that the rest of us taxpayers scratch our head and go, why are you going there? In this case, Commissioner, when you're, part of the Minnesota Public Utilities Commission, why do you need to be traveling to the Caribbean? So talk a little bit about the reason why you're here and why that sign is behind you and what people can do about it.
Absolutely. So Minnesota, and quite rightfully so, is part of a national group, the National Association of Regulated Utility Commissioners, the people who set utility rates and set utility policy in the 50 states of the union have a group. It's good for them to train new people coming into the field. I'm, in fact, a 2006 graduate of one of their schools. It's a fabulous opportunity to do training, but we don't need to send our public officials at ratepayer expense, the expense of poor people, to the Caribbean, and worse yet, to a Caribbean casino, the Sheraton Casino and Resort in San Juan, Puerto Rico, the weekend after Election Day, steps from Condado Beach, one of the very finest beaches in all of the Americas, and a short water taxi ride to the largest, indeed the largest, rum distillery on planet Earth, producing 100,000 liters of premium American rum each and every day. I'm, of course, talking about Casa Bacardi. This is a wildly, astonishingly inappropriate use of ratepayer funds. We can stop it. You can stop it with a single phone call. And that's the question. It's one thing, I think, for conservatives and for decent people to be upset about feeding our future after the fact.
Yeah.
Now we know before the money is being spent. If you don't want your commissioners going to a casino with your money, it's a phone call. And you can stop it. And it's the easiest kind of activism that conservatives to do. I don't want people to have occasion to move out of the state. We can keep, Minnesotans. There's a great, lots of reasons to live here. But we need to be able to pick up the phone. And I think it's an important call to conservatives. If you're not willing to pick up the phone to stop this kind of abuse, well, then you can't complain later when $8 billion goes out the door.
It seems like as you were describing it, I'm like, I want to go on that trip. But it's also, but again, that would be my own money paying for it. I certainly don't want to pay for other individuals to do it. Nevertheless, under the guise of being under the Minnesota Public Utilities Commission, do we know what their excuse is? I mean, what is their justification for this? That they earned this trip? Eric Lippman, what are they?
No. I think if you ask them, and indeed submitted as part of the press release, I did a data practices request to ask for the government records in this. That's how I know in detail what they're planning and what they're spending and what they have spent over the last 13 months. Their rationale for going to last year's conference in Seattle, and all 5 commissioners at an expense of almost $15,000 went last year to this same group's event. The rationale was that they needed to exchange information. Well, I think post-COVID, we know that you can do a lot of meetings online. In fact, the Minnesota Public Utilities Commission itself is a leader in WebEx streaming of all of its meetings. It knows how to connect with people and share information over the interwebs. This is not rocket science. But I think that the Minnesota Public Utilities Commissioners, truth be told, enjoy terry cloth robes, enjoy luxury travel, enjoy the shrimp cocktail, enjoy the cocktail bar. And in fact, if you read the NARUC materials, they don't want you quoting what commissioners will say at happy hour because it's untoward. So they don't want ratepayers knowing. They don't want ratepayers going. They'll charge you $1,000 in order to join them for drinks in San Juan. Next to Condado Beach, ratepayers can in fact go if you can fly to the Caribbean and if you can pay $1,000 and promise not to quote them. So all of this, I think, is a bad look. It's not a good use of resources. In fact, there is an absolutely fabulous course that NARUC is putting online that very week in performance-based regulation, so actually the kind of regulatory systems where you could get improvement. Nobody, I would suggest none of the 5 commissioners were planning on attending that coursework online, but they all were planning on going and enjoying shrimp cocktail and rum drinks in San Juan, unless, of course, you're willing to make a telephone call and stop this, because it's going right to your utility bill.
For those that are watching, you can see the number up on the screen, 651-201-3400. That's for the governor. The commission itself is 651-296-0406. Is there a place online where people can also go and get this information?
Absolutely. Well, so at our website at utilityreformnow.com, we have all sorts of information about this and other things that the Public Utilities Commission is doing. Also, if you go to the PUC's own website, min.gov/PUC, the Consumer Affairs Office will take by fax or by email or by letter or by phone call any comment that any ratepayer on the planet Earth wants to share with them. And they're really good about that. And in fact, I think the Public Utilities Commission, all 5 members are committed to being open and accessible about that. The question is, when we raise these important topics, will they be responsive? That's what we need to test. That's what we need to change.
What would the process be to stop this type of expenditure? Is it just a matter of somebody within the commission or the governor's office coming and saying, hey, don't take this trip, don't spend the money on this? What would you like to see happen, and how does that play out, Eric?
Yeah, all of the above. I think that's exactly it. We are changing the incentive structure, and your viewers and listeners can help change the incentive structure and the permission structure. I really don't think that, and again, Chairwoman Sieben, the chair of our Public Utilities Commission, is an officer of the group that developed and approved the San Juan Conference. I don't know how any of the adults in the room who are concerned about the money that they're charging the poorest ratepayers in our community, and we can talk about how they're charged. It's awful. It's a scandal. But how you could take an expense like this and charge them, and it suggests a level of cluelessness and inattentiveness that we really need to address. We need to change the incentive structure by calling attention to this kind of abuse and saying, no, not on our watch. We want something different and better for the public servants. We pay them $74,000 plus salary and fringe each and every year. So that's about $1 million in salary and benefit expense for these 5 folks. We can expect, I think, a higher level of attentiveness and care for ratepayers than we're getting. If I could just make one other point.
Yeah, go right ahead.
How we charge regulatory expenses, the expenses of the commission, is on a per therm for natural gas, or per kilowatt for every kilowatt that you use when you turn on the light at your house. A share of that is the government expenses for regulating utilities, including their obscene amounts of travel. In the last 13 months, so say their records, it's nearly $80,000 in out-of-state travel, not in-state travel. These are to other locations, and conferences that they're going for an 80-person agency. It's about $1,000 per state employee. Most of that is spent by the 5 commissioners at the top, about $50,000 over a 13-month period. It's an obscene amount of travel. I, twice in my state career, was part of the management of an 80-person agency. We would never think of spending these kinds of sums on out-of-state travel. Chairwoman Sieben had 7 trips in a 13-month period. That's every other month going to other places not related to Minnesota utility regulation, to talk with
ridiculous.
folks, other folks
ridiculous.
about how to do the job here. The job is in St. Paul. One phone call to the governor's office by your listeners will get the commissioners to focus on the work here and to reduce the cost of the work here.
I have to imagine this is a systemic issue. And we've talked about issues like this of travel in other government departments. And so while we're focused on the Minnesota Public Utilities Commission, again, talking with Eric Lippman, the Chief Advocacy Officer at Utility Reform Now. But I already see you shaking your head. This is a systemic issue across all these different government entities, right?
Absolutely. And again, I'm telling this story because I think not only does the Public Utilities Commission, like every human on planet Earth, we operate and we organize information based upon the story. The problems are cultural. Yeah. The idea that these folks, including Minnesotans, planned this conference, and are set absolutely as day follows night to charge us, to charge poor ratepayers these sums. The poor tend to pay more because they live in drafty houses. They're consuming more energy. They don't tend to live in energy efficient homes. And so in the most regressive tax possible, the progressives on the Minnesota Public Utilities Commission are going to charge terry cloth robes and shrimp cocktail in a casino in the Caribbean next to a rum distillery to the poorest of Minnesotans. I think by working on this issue, it will have downstream effects for everything else. You become more sensitive to the budget operations, to following the rule of law in your proceedings. There are all sorts of things that we're working on, but this, I think, is an example that proves what we need to do.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of that as of late. We go back to when we were talking about the stunt regarding the voter vouching. Again, talking with Eric Lippman, a chief advocacy officer at Utility Reform Now. I have a question that rolled in for you. I want to ask you in just a moment. Talk about the organization. Talk about Utility Reform Now, and I'm sure you're working on other issues as well. And talk a little bit about what you guys do.
Yeah, absolutely. And so. I am the front man of genuine ratepayers. Most of them tend to be state employees and folks who are in the industry who don't want to be out, who have unorthodox or heterodox opinions about rate regulation. This is a very complicated area of the law about how we set utility rates and how utilities operate. It's very complicated stuff. And so that's how the grift works, which is they hide behind complexity because the utility operations are not very transparent and not transparent to ordinary voters, and people are busy, ordinary ratepayers.
We're not really thinking about it. I mean, it's one of those things that's just kind of there. We just pay the fees and we just kind of move on with life.
Which is why I feel a special calling, because I'm specially trained. Not only do I have 19 years of experience of doing complicated utility, rate making matters and other regulatory matters. I have a law degree. I'm also specially trained because I have a certification from Michigan State University, from the Institute for Public Utilities in Advanced Regulatory Studies. So I'm the citizen ninja, the insider. Maybe I'm the turncoat who is talking about how the system really works. But my job, I think, and my calling is to make the complicated simple so that ordinary people, particularly poor people, aren't ripped off. That's the idea.
How did you land at this issue? How did you come about this in terms of your university background? How did you land on public utility?
Oh, well, I as I explained in another podcast for the center, the one that Grace and Catherine do, since I've been able to get myself places. I've been going to a government office for work. I'm a G-man, okay? But I'm a G-man, maybe I'm the sleeper cell in state government for so long. We're trying to improve it because we're answering Thomas Jefferson's question. In a famous set of letters to a friend of him, he worried about whether people would have the virtue for self-government, because all of human history really is a condensation towards or direction moving towards greater authoritarianism. Yeah. The American Revolution was revolutionary because it was ordinary citizens saying, no, we can govern ourselves. Now, again, every now and again, it's going to require citizens to show up. I'm hoping that they'll go to their phones, make a single phone call, the easiest activism that you can, to stop abusive spending. And from that, I think we can build a different kind of culture that's more transparent and more service-oriented, particularly for the poor.
The numbers, again, for the governor's office, 651-201-3400, and the commission itself, 651-296-0406. Curtis left a question. He says, these public utility commissioners, what kind of pensions are they allowed to have or collect? And can they collect multiple based off of multiple positions? Do you know the answer to that?
Well, actually, Commissioner Tuma, I sat 2 seats from on the House floor. We sat together when I was a member of the House of Representatives. He's now on the Public Utilities Commission. Similarly, also in the Washington County delegation was Katie Sieben, now the chair. She was a House member when I was a House member, and then later a senator. So I'm sure there are legislative pensions, for both of those members, and that additional contributions will be made each and every month to the State Board of Investment on behalf of them. And actually, that's an important story, too, for Curtis, if I can just pivot a second from his question.
Go right ahead.
If you think about this, I've told the story before. I'm a state pensioner. I retired in December after 30 years of state service. So I get a state pension, much like these other folks. And that's how I'm able to finance this citizen advocacy, because I've got a state pension. This is great. That's a good use, I think, of a state pension, one that I hope Curtis will like. The other piece about it is that the State Board of Investment has a similar size and a similar budget to the Public Utilities Commission. about 80 employees or so. It's 75 at the State Board of Investment. It's about $19 million worth of budget, $19 million worth of budget. They're a pretty similar size organization. However, the regulatory reach of the State Board of Investment, the people who do the investment for the pension funds, is 20 times that of the Public Utilities Commission because they don't use lawyers. They invest their funds based upon market metrics. They use the Wall Street Journal or things that we know about the financial markets in order to get good performance out of the pensions. The Public Utilities Commission wastes all sorts of money, $3.5 million to decide a single rate case. The XL rate case, they wanted to charge us $3.5 million to decide whether a single table of 48 numbers was reasonable. This is an obscene waste of money, but really different models. In state government, comparable. One is highly effective, the pension folks, because they use market metrics and familiar financial tools, and the other folks use lawyers and litigation and red tape, and it's wildly inefficient and expensive. Those are two different models that I'd love for Curtis to pay attention to. The pensions, he's right to follow the pensions, but where does he follow it? He should follow it not only into how much they're compensated, but also who's doing the kind of state service he would want.
Utility Reform Now, an association of Minnesota utility ratepayers, calling on the 5 commissioners of the Minnesota Public Utilities Commission not to charge Minnesota ratepayers for post-election day travel by the commissioners to the Caribbean. And it's not just the Caribbean as you laid out. This would be a lavish vacation for anybody. You can make the phone call 651-201-3400 or 651-296-0406. Erica Lippman, again, where can people go online if they missed those numbers to find out more about this important issue?
Sure. It's utilityreformnow.com, utilityreformnow.com on the internet, and also similarly, Utility Reform Now at Instagram and YouTube. We'd love to have you look at our content and share our content and give us feedback.
Thank you so much for joining the show this morning. We'll have to have you back in and pick your brain even further about this issue and just the state of Minnesota in general. But I really enjoyed the conversation this morning. Thank you, Eric.
Thanks so much, John.
All right, we're getting ready to wrap up the show for a Wednesday. Tomorrow we'll be talking with Paul Wickstrom. He'll be joining us right around 7:30. Also on tomorrow's show, a judge dismisses DOJ lawsuit against Minneapolis schools, but have grave doubts about race-based policy. And we'll revisit the story I didn't get a chance to get into further detail over of the Minneapolis ordinance ridiculously targeting velvet rope discrimination. Velvet rope discrimination is apparently a thing now at bars and restaurants. And of course, all the news that breaks between now and tomorrow morning. Thank you to all the fantastic sponsors of the John Justice Show, presented by American Experiment. Of course, NutraWave and UTRIWAVE.us. Head on over and give them a call and check out what they offer in terms of their amazing weight loss program and Dr. Bob. Also, MiniLeaf and MiniLeaf.com, MINNELEAF.com. Remember, not only do you get fantastic products and their night gummies that have gotten my sleep back on track, the fun gummies, the spooky mini leaf tonics, but those spooky mini leaf tonics, along with the packaging at Mini Leaf, it's all done locally, right there in Brooklyn Park. The tonics are brewed in Eden Prairie. Their mission is for you to live a better life through their products, and it absolutely is the case. My sleep has gotten back on track, getting me ready every single day to come and talk to you Monday through Friday, 6 until 9 a.m. Thank you so much for spending time with us today. If you missed any portion of today's show and the interviews with Liz Collins, Eric Lippman, who had just joined us, and of course, Lieutenant Governor candidate with Lisa Damath, Ryan Wilson, check out the podcast. Producer Isaac will have that posted shortly up on the MixLR app and across all the podcast platforms. Also, the video rewatch can be seen at Rumble and on Facebook and YouTube as well. Thank you so much for hanging out today. I'm looking forward to talking to you guys tomorrow morning. God bless. Have yourself a great Wednesday, and I'll talk to you guys then. Bye.
Static waves at dawn, a voice that lingers when night is gone. Twin cities hum with stories. the rising sun.